Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Like, share, and subscribe, and let's begin the story.
I looked up from my glass of whiskey to notice the cute blonde girl staring at me from across the bar. I had been eyeing her all night, hoping she would notice me. Unfortunately, her statuesque poise and piercing blue eyes, gazing into the depths of my soul, were not the indicator of interest I so solemnly hoped for. When I say statuesque, I mean she literally resembled a fucking statue, unmoving and unbreathing. In fact, nobody in the bar was moving. Even the bartender was still holding an upturned Jack Daniels bottle aimed towards a shot glass. The liquid contents coming out stayed frozen in time like an icicle just inches from the glass. I wasn't alone, though. And while I stared straight ahead at the bar full of numerous frozen bodies stuck in gestures and poses of their previous cheerful time, I could feel the intense wave of heat radiating from my right. The seat next to me was empty all night, but now something was there. If anyone could have looked at me there in that moment, I might have not looked that different from the frozen individuals all around me. I stayed staring straight ahead of me because I was panicking on the inside. I didn't want to look to my right. I was scared at the thought of what found me on this fateful night and what it would do to me. I thought if I just pretended to stay frozen like everything else, it would just leave me alone. But I was wrong. It was then it started to talk to me. "Are you done pretending to be frozen yet? I don't much like drinking alone," the thing next to me said. Every word it spoke blared into my ears like a deep baritone commanding my attention, followed by an aftershock of slithering words crawling into my ears, hissing and repeating the same thing with a sense of annoyance that I wouldn't adhere to its presence. My head started pounding like it was going to burst. The feeling of needles sticking into every area of my skin pierced my sensations and caused tears to stream down my eyes and cry out in pain. And then all the pain just stopped. The voice spoke again, but it sounded less hostile and more appropriate to human ears. It said to look at him, or the pain could come back in ways I couldn't imagine. I wiped the tears from my eyes and did something I had not done since I was a child. I asked God to forgive me for anything I had done, and I turned my head to look at the presence. It wasn't the black jeans or black shoes it was wearing I found off-putting. It also wasn't the red knit long-sleeve thermal shirt it was wearing or the black wool overcoat hanging around it. The skin tone was fair and the hair was short and blonde that decorated its head, none of which was off-putting as well at the first glance. At a second glance it was very off-putting. It looked just like me. It was like I was staring at myself in a mirror almost, except my shirt was white. Then there were the eyes, perhaps the most off-putting thing that scared me to my core. They were just black. No pupils. Just black eyes that pierced me. There are no words to describe what it felt like to stare at those. My mind raced through fear and question as my consciousnesses struggled to understand what was happening. The thing before me sensed this as it sat relaxed in the bar stool with a glass of whiskey it sipped on. As I recollect my memory of the night, I'll just say that the entity spoke for the duration of the night. The corresponding conversation is as follows below. "I can hear your thoughts quite well, so there's no need to speak. I never much liked the sound you animals made as your vocal cords evolved throughout the years. Who am I? I hear this running through your head, but you already know my old friend. Remember when you begged your mom not to leave you alone at night as a child in your bedroom? You'd slowly drift asleep as she gently caressed your hair, and all of a sudden, you'd wake up screaming for her in the middle of the night, realizing she left you all alone with the monster under your bed." It made a deep laugh to itself while licking its lips, before taking another sip of the whiskey and continuing. "If I recall correctly, you'd bury your eyes in the pillow right when you woke up sobbing. You'd yell for mommy and wait for her to come in and caress your hair again, crying about the monster under your bed that wanted to eat you. And you were right. I was there the whole time listening. In fact, you were too young to realize your mother was a crack addict. She couldn't wake up to your screams even if a gangbang ran right through her, which they did as you cried for her. That was me caressing your hair in the middle of the night, me gently whispering to you to fall asleep. All those dreams of safety you had shortly after in vain, as I sat drinking, in that intoxicating fear that surrounded you as your subconscious took over, licking your face as you slept. Thoughts raced in my mind as tears flooded my eyes, staring at the being in front of me. Its piercing eyes studied me like a science project, but grinning with a sick fetish for the toxins my brain was releasing. It loved it. It fed off it. It took a sip from the whiskey glass and slid it across to me on the bar. "You're saying my name in your head. Well, one them at least. You want me to say it for you to settle your disbelief, but that would just be so boring, wouldn't it? I like hearing you convince yourself I'm just an apparition of your guilt for decisions you've made. It quite tickles me, actually. If it makes you feel better, you can think of me as an angel. Theoretically, I never stopped being one, although I find the term a bit too conservative for my taste. Challenging the status quo is what made me and 1/3 of the boys upstairs a new home we call hell. Before I tell you why I'm here, yes, I can hear you asking if I can smell that you've pissed yourself. It's okay. You're not the first to do that. Yay, it's a little annoying, but I've seen worse." At this point, the devil before me slid the entire bottle of whiskey down the bar to me and refused to go any further until I downed at least 2 gulps of it, claiming if I didn't calm the burning questions in my head, it would smash the bottle across it instead. It also claimed that it knew of the questionable gay porn which populated my browser, which for the record I will say was not from my doing, but because my computer was hacked at the time. After 2 gulps, the entity continued its conversation. "So now that you're a little calmer, as close as it can be, you'll be surprised to know that you're actually quite a celebrity in hell. Actually, myself included, we're all big fans of yours. You are quite the artist and inspiration. I was there when it started, the night your mother overdosed after telling you she was going to get you candy from the store. She actually went to your deadbeat dad's house for a fix. It's too bad he still found the time to have his way with her after she overdosed before calling the cops. But yay, that's not important. You probably knew that already. That night you picked up a paint set lying around your room. You found a dead rat close to it, and knowing the red paint was missing from that set, you made no delay in finding a replacement. It was at that moment I saw the artist in you. You were raw talent born in sin and negligence, a born bastard out of wedlock. God would have casted you to me anyway. So, you know what I did that night? I told a few of my boys to keep an eye on you and make sure you got into the right foster care. Made sure you were put into a decent family that would give you a good education. You thrived. You went to college, became a doctor, and perfected your talent. Most kids from your upbringing would have just ended their life out of depression, but you channeled those misgivings to create art amongst the world. I'll just tell you, my personal favorite is the work you did on your father. Seeing him crawl with no limbs across the floor for 3 days is something we all still laugh about in hell to this day. Oh, and let's not forget about the medical school student who failed out that you lured to that motel with a plan you had to get her back in. I mean, the things you did to her uterus while she was paralyzed but still conscious definitely makes me see the artistic expression of how you felt about your mother. I almost shed a tear at the beauty thinking about it. You've been getting some doubt in the back of your mind lately as to if you're a monster. I also hear in your thoughts you've regretted this. Well, I am here to tell you that that is rubbish. I support you fully, and just wanted to let you know you have my full support in your endeavors. Wipe those negative thoughts from your mind, son. You're an artist. I saw you looking at that cute blonde girl at the bar tonight. Let me clear the doubt in your head. Yes, you deserve the night with her. She has about 3 years until she dies of ovarian cancer, honestly. So just go through your calculated plans to fulfill your mommy fetish and recycle her meat to the homeless. Don't see any issues there. Now that you seem calmer knowing you have my approval, why I am really here is to tell you that the cops are on to you. No, don't freak out. We have plenty of cops in our debt we can call in favors, but that won't really do an ounce of good if you don't get that fucking femur bone out of the trunk of your car. Yes, I know you didn't know it was there. That's why I am fucking here. Look, I'll just wait here at the bar, and you can just drive on back home while everything is still. Dispose of that evidence in your trunk, and meet me back here and everything will be just right. And that blonde hair cutie, whose name is Camille by the way, will be waiting for you right when you get back. Get to it." At that point, I left the bar and drove home, disposed of what was revealed to me. I am typing this before I drive back to the bar as the world stands still. The most shocking thing about this night to me so far is the red knit long-sleeve shirt the entity was wearing. I had the same shirt, but discovered it was missing from my house just now. I just find it horrific that an ever-present being would take my shirt. Elena Santos traced her fingers along the spine of an ancient tome, feeling the leather pulse beneath her touch like something alive. The binding seemed to breathe under her hands, a subtle rhythm that matched neither her heartbeat nor any earthly tempo. 3 months had passed since she'd answered the peculiar job listing: apprentice needed, traditional bookbinding experience required, must be comfortable with unusual hours and unique materials, inquire at 17 Corvid Lane. The address had led her to a narrow townhouse wedged between 2 larger buildings, its windows reflecting light at odd angles. Even now, Elena couldn't quite remember how many floors it had. The architecture seemed to shift when she wasn't looking directly at it, windows and gables rearranging themselves like words on a page. The man who opened the door, Jaron Tain, looked exactly as she'd imagined a master bookbinder would. Stooped and ink-stained, wearing a leather apron scarred by countless small burns and chemical spills. His eyes, though, held a feverish intensity that should have been her first warning. "You've come highly recommended," he'd said, though Elena hadn't mentioned her application to anyone. "I've been watching your work at the University Bindery. Such careful attention to detail, such reverence for the written word." His voice had carried strange undertones, harmonics that seemed to resonate in her bones. Behind him, shadows moved in ways that defied the light source, and she caught a whiff of something that reminded her of old pond water in decay. The workshop had seemed normal enough at first glance. Worn wooden workbenches, shelves lined with tools and materials, the comforting smell of leather and glue. But as the weeks passed, Elena began noticing things that didn't quite fit. The rulers sometimes measured different lengths depending on the time of day. The awls left holes that sealed themselves when she wasn't looking. And the shadows. The shadows were always deeper than they should be, pooling in corners like black ink. A fragment of poetry had appeared on her workbench one morning, written in Thomas Reed's distinctive hand. "In spaces between bound pages tight, whispers echo from infinite night." The words had seemed to squirm on the paper, and Elena found herself humming their rhythm as she worked, though she couldn't remember consciously reading them. Now, working in his basement workshop by lamplight, Elena understood why he'd valued those qualities. The books that passed through their hands were like nothing she'd encountered in her training. Some were bound in materials she couldn't identify: leather that felt too warm, cloth that seemed to breathe, metal clasps that moved when touched. Others contained text that seemed to shift when viewed directly, letters crawling across pages like insects searching for new arrangements. All of them carried a weight that had nothing to do with their physical mass. Tonight's project sat before her: a stack of loose pages that had arrived in a leather satchel, delivered by Myrold Rook, the keeper of the script. His hands had trembled as he handed over the package, and Elena noticed that his shadow didn't quite match his movements, always a fraction too slow or too fast. "These are special," he'd whispered, glancing nervously at the shadows between the shelves. "The High Scribe herself has marked them for binding. Our patron grows hungry." He'd hesitated then, pulling something else from his satchel, a small envelope sealed with dark wax. The seal bore a symbol that seemed to shift when Elena tried to focus on it. "From Althesa Varen herself," he'd added, his voice barely above a whisper. "She says you're to read it only after you've completed the binding. She saw something about you in her last trance." The pages felt warm to the touch, and the script that crawled across them made her eyes water. Some bore notations in different hands. She recognized Thomas Reed's poetry, interwoven with the main text, his verses speaking of a darkness that devoured light and a horizon where reality ended. Other margins contained desperate warnings in what she now knew to be Miranda Wells' handwriting. "The words breed in dreams. They want more than just readers. They want vessels. Elena's fascination warred with her terror. Part of her wanted to run, to forget everything she'd seen and return to the simple work of binding normal books. But another part, growing stronger each day, yearned to understand the mysteries hidden in these impossible texts. The hunger for knowledge had taken root in her mind, and she found herself wondering if this was how Miranda had felt before she disappeared. "Careful with the binding thread," Jaron called from his desk. "These pages like to wander if they're not properly secured." He was hunched over his own work, transcribing text from one volume to another. Elena had noticed that he often worked in his sleep, his hands moving with mechanical precision while his eyes remained closed, lips forming words in languages that hurt her ears. Sometimes she caught glimpses of other figures moving around him in those moments, shadowy forms that vanished when she tried to look at them directly. The thread she used was unlike any she'd worked with before. It seemed to move of its own accord, sometimes anticipating where she needed it to go. It felt warm between her fingers, like it had just been pulled from something living, and she could have sworn she felt a pulse running through it. As she sewed, she realized she wasn't just binding pages together. She was stitching fragments of reality, creating seams between what was and what waited in the spaces between words. As Elena's needle pierced the warm leather binding, the workshop around her suddenly dissolved. The thread between her fingers turned liquid black, running down her hands like ink, and the world shifted. She stood beneath an impossible sky. Where blue should have been, absolute darkness stretched overhead, a void so complete it seemed to swallow light itself. The sun hung low and bloated, transformed into a massive crimson eye that bathed everything in red twilight. Then she saw the figure. Standing at the intersection of 4 streets was a being both terrible and beautiful. Though human in general shape, 4 arms extended from their frame in perfect symmetry. Their eyes were pools of absolute darkness, streaming tears of blood that traced patterns down their cheeks. Upon their forehead, a strange sigil burned with an inner light that hurt to look at directly. With a jolt of recognition, Elena realized it was the same symbol that had sealed Althesa's envelope. The figure raised all 4 arms to the void-black sky. Elena gasped, finding herself back in the workshop, her hands trembling around the half-bound book. Sweat beaded on her forehead, and she quickly wiped it away with her sleeve, trying to steady her breathing. The thread was just thread again, though her fingers still tingled where it had touched them. Making progress? Jaren's voice came from the doorway, making her jump. She hadn't heard him approach. He stood there in his ink-stained apron, looking exactly as he always did, though somehow his shadow seemed darker than usual. "Yes," Elena managed, proud that her voice remained steady despite her racing heart. "The binding is coming along well." She bent her head to her work, hoping he wouldn't notice how her hands shook as she picked up the needle again. Later, while cleaning his tools, Jaren spoke softly, almost to himself. "I was like you once," he said, his voice carrying those strange harmonics. "A simple bookbinder until I understood that some books want more than just to be read. They taught me their language, showed me the spaces between words where truth lives." He turned to her, and for a moment his eyes seemed to contain galaxies. "The Dark One offers knowledge beyond imagining, Elena. The cost—" He smiled, and in the lamplight his teeth gleamed like wet ink. "The cost becomes irrelevant once you understand what waits on the other side of the page." She'd begun having dreams about the books. In them, she watched letters crawl across pages like insects, forming and reforming into messages that left her gasping awake. She dreamed of vast libraries where the shelves went on forever, and all the books whispered her name. Sometimes she heard voices from the workshop below her rented room, though Jaren insisted he never worked past midnight. The shadows in the corners seemed deeper each day, and she often caught movement in them from the corner of her eye. Suggestions of figures walking between the shelves, of hands reaching out from between books. Through these dreams, she began to understand the congregation's structure. Jaren, as the bound archivist, created gateways through his bindings. Myrald Rook, the nervous keeper, distributed the texts to those marked for initiation. Above them both stood Althesa Veron, the High Scribe, who received direct instructions from their patron, the Dark One itself. In these dreams, fragments of what she'd glimpsed haunted her, the void black sky, the crimson sun that shouldn't be, and always that figure, that terrible, magnificent figure whose presence made reality shiver. Her mind recoiled from remembering too much, but the images lingered like after-images burned into her vision. Sometimes when she woke, gasping in the dark, she could still feel the weight of that impossible sky pressing down on her, and her fingers would trace patterns in the air, unconsciously mimicking the sigil she'd seen burning on the figure's brow. A loose page fluttered from the stack. She recognized the university library stamp, though the seal seemed wrong somehow, rotating slowly when she wasn't looking directly at it. The margin contained a neat notation, found by M.W. Below that, another hand had added, processed for distribution. M. Rook. Elena had heard whispers about Miranda Wells, the librarian who had vanished from Blackmere University. Some said she'd simply left town, but Elena had seen other notes in her handwriting, growing increasingly frantic, speaking of words that bred in dreams and truths that devoured readers. As Elena reached for the page, her sleeve pulled back, revealing the strange marks that had begun appearing on her skin. They looked like ink stains at first, but they moved slightly when she slept, forming letters and alphabets that had never existed in any earthly language. She'd stopped trying to wash them off after noticing that soap and water only made them spread faster. Sometimes, in the right light, they seemed to form words from the texts she'd been binding, prophecies and promises that wrote themselves into her flesh. "You're progressing well," Jaren said, suddenly behind her, though she hadn't heard him move. His shadow on the wall didn't match his movements, and Elena noticed that his apron now bore stains that seemed to gleam with their own inner light. "Soon, you'll be ready to begin the real work." When he smiled, his teeth looked too sharp, too numerous, as if his mouth contained several sets that shifted and changed when he spoke. The realization hit her then. She wasn't just binding books anymore. Each stitch, each carefully aligned page, was helping to bind something larger, reality itself. The books were merely vessels, channels through which something vast and hungry could reach into the world. And she, with her careful stitches and precise alignments, was helping to create the perfect gateway. "There's a gathering tonight," Jaren continued, his voice carrying those strange harmonics that made her bones vibrate. "The Dark One wishes to see your work." He gestured to a bookshelf that Elena could have sworn hadn't been there a moment ago. Few apprentices progressed so quickly to drawing its attention. The shelf held copies of Thomas Reed's latest works, their spines gleaming with an inner light. Elena had helped bind some of them herself, using thread that moved like living things, and leather that felt too warm to the touch. She'd seen how the text changed between readings, how the words rearranged themselves to reveal new horrors to each reader. "The congregation welcomes those who understand the true power of words," Jaren said, producing a small, leather-bound volume from his pocket. "This was your first binding with us. I think you're ready to read it now." The book felt heavy in Elena's hands, its cover warm and slightly yielding, like skin. The pages, when she opened them, contained text in her own handwriting, words she didn't remember writing, describing things she couldn't possibly have seen. Horror and fascination warred within her as she read. Part of her wanted to throw the book aside, to run from the workshop and never look back. But a deeper part, the part that had always loved the secret worlds hidden between pages, understood that she had already chosen her path. Like Miranda Wells before her, like Thomas Reed with his dark verses, she had been drawn into something larger than herself. Elena's hands moved automatically, continuing their work even as her mind reeled from these revelations. The thread wove patterns that couldn't exist in three-dimensional space, binding not just paper and leather, but something else, something that pulsed with ancient hunger. She was no longer just binding books. She was binding realities together, creating gateways between what was and what waited in the spaces between words. Through the basement window, she could see fog gathering in the street, forming shapes that reminded her of letters in a cosmic alphabet. Somewhere in that mist, she knew, other members of the congregation of the Whispering Page were preparing for tonight's ceremony. The bookseller who'd given her the mysterious job listing, the nervous keeper who brought them pages, the poet whose words now crawled across her skin in her sleep. As she completed the final binding, Elena understood at last what Miranda's notes had meant. The words didn't just want to be read, they wanted to be bound, to be given form and substance in our world. With trembling fingers, she reached for Althesa's envelope, breaking the shifting seal. Inside was a single page of thick paper, covered in elegant script that seemed to write itself as she watched. You've seen it now, haven't you, Elena? The truth waiting in the dark sky. The figure that bridges worlds. We each play our part in what's to come. You with your bindings, me with my visions, Jaren with his translations. The Dark One chooses us carefully, dear Elena. Your hands know the work already, even if your mind hasn't caught up. Bind these pages well. They're more important than you yet realize. Elena's fingers traced the binding she'd just completed, feeling the warmth pulsing beneath the leather. Horror and fascination mingled in her chest. But underneath them both was something else, a deep, thrumming certainty. Every book she'd bound had been a practice run for this moment. Every stitch had taught her hands the patterns they would need. She could run, yes. But the truth was, she didn't want to. The black horizon was coming, and Elena Santos, once a simple bookbinder, would help usher it in, one bound volume at a time. Her hands moved across the leather and paper, each stitch drawing the darkness closer, each page carrying whispers of the truth that waited in the spaces between words. And in the shadows of the workshop, the Dark One watched her work with hungry anticipation, its patience measured in the slow turning of pages and the endless whisper of ancient prophecies. The chill began not with a scream, but with a laugh, a goofy, carefree sound from the depths of my own head. I sat up in bed with a jolt, wrapped in my blankets, the digital clock blinding me with 3:17 a.m. My skin was slick with sweat. Just a nightmare, I reassured myself, coaxing my racing heart to calm. But the laugh remained, an echo of something wrong. Morning came, tinting the sky with shades of bruised purple and tentative gold. I dragged myself from bed, the lingering fear holding on to me like cobwebs. Coffee, black and powerful, was my sole protection from the insidious fear. My phone vibrated. A message from Mom. Don't forget Mark's birthday dinner this evening. He's really excited to see you. Mark? The name scratched at the back of my mind. An itch I couldn't quite scratch. Who's Mark? I texted back, a flicker of confusion igniting in my chest. The reply was instant. Don't be silly. Mark, you know, you're practically brother. You've known him since you were a kid. Don't tell me you forgot. She even threw in a laughing emoji, as if this was some grand joke. But it wasn't a joke. I didn't know Mark. Not even a shard of recognition glimmered in my mind. Mom, I'm serious, I typed back, my fingers shaking a little. I don't know who Mark is. I've never met anyone by that name. She didn't answer. Panic scratched at my throat. I sprinted to the bookshelf, yanking out photo albums, their covers cracked and worn. Birthday parties, Christmas mornings, school graduations, the milestones of my life in grainy photographs. And there he was, Mark, a steady figure, a smiling face in the periphery of every milestone. He was tossing a football with me at my 10th birthday, shoulder to shoulder with my sister at my high school graduation, even raising a glass at my 21st birthday party. He was everywhere, but I didn't remember him at all. Desperate, I moved. I took my keys, a sense of panic driving me in circles in my mind. My sister, she'll remember, my best friend. They'll recognize that this is not right. My sister Sarah opened the door, smiling brightly. Hey, Mark's birthday now? The words struck me as if I had been physically hit. I felt my head reel. "Sarah, who is Mark?" I begged, my voice hoarse with fear. "I've never met him. This doesn't make any sense at all." She looked at me, her smile wavering. "What are you talking about? Mark. He's been here forever. Don't you recall all the summers we spent at his family's lake house? The time he rescued you from the pool when you were going to drown?" I shook my head, my eyes welling up with tears. "No, none of that ever happened. I don't remember any of it." I stared at my good friend Chloe, hoping and praying she'd explain to me that Sarah was joking, playing some vicious trick on me. Chloe merely gave me a blend of concern and puzzlement, though. "Are you okay? You've seemed really out of it today. Of course you know Mark. He's pretty much part of the family." We stuffed into Chloe's car, Sarah and I in the back, Chloe behind the wheel, the silence heavy with unasked questions. My head spun, attempting to get a handle on what was occurring. Closing my eyes, I struggled to remember my childhood, to find some shred of evidence that Mark was ever in my past. Nothing. Then a flicker, a burst of images, broken and confusing. Me laughing with Mark, keeping secrets beneath a starry night sky, walking hand in hand. Memories that weren't my own. Memories being implanted, jammed into my mind. It was as if I was seeing a warped movie reel, pieces of another life I'd never lived imposed on the life I knew. A tide of sickness spilled over me. I gasped, grabbing at my head, the implanted memories threatening to engulf me. We got to Mom's place. I stumbled out of the vehicle, my legs leaden. I needed evidence. I needed to discover something, anything that would validate that I wasn't losing my mind. I rushed to my former bedroom, dodging Mom's cries, and furiously started up my computer. Emails, texts, Facebook. I needed to dig into every digital aspect of my existence for proof that I was not insane. And there it was. Years-old emails from Mark, Facebook messages with those inside jokes, photographs with his name. I had responded to his messages, sent multiple emails, engaged with him online as if he were a permanent figure in my life. But I couldn't recall any of them. My mother shouted out, "Dinner's ready!" Her voice sounded abnormally cheerful, almost forced. I came out of my room, my heart racing against my ribcage, a chill of fear in my belly. And that's when I saw him. He was in the living room, standing beside my mother, his arms slung carelessly around her shoulder. Mark. He wasn't what I imagined, not ugly, not terrifying, just normal. Average height, brown hair, forgettable features. He resembled the kind of person you'd pass on the sidewalk and never give a second glance. And yet, his presence dominated the room with an overbearing weight, a crushing feeling of wrongness. His gaze met mine, and a slow, creepy smile crossed his face. It wasn't a welcoming smile. It was a smile that knew something I didn't know. A smile that threatened something awful was going to occur. It was the smile of a predator. A shock, a shivering breath. I awoke. 3:17 a.m. again. Sweating, I sat upright in bed, my heart pounding against my ribcage. This time the giggle wasn't a distant whisper. It was nearer, more tangible. My phone beeped. Mom again. "Don't forget Mark's birthday dinner tonight. He's really looking forward to seeing you." The message was the same, word for word. I hurled the phone across the room, a strangled cry escaping my mouth. It was happening again. This was not a dream. This was real. I got out of bed, clamoring for something that would ground me in the real world. I glanced at my room, hoping for something, anything, that would attest to the fact that I wasn't going crazy. My eyes landed on a framed photo on my dresser. It was one of my dad and me, taken when I was a child. I hadn't seen it in years. Except, it wasn't just my dad and me anymore. By my dad's side, his arm slung over my shoulder, was Mark. The same bland face, the same creepy smile. He had taken my father's place in my own mind. I could feel a scream rising in my throat, a raw howl of rage and terror. My memories were being stolen from me, rewritten, replaced with this thing. I sprinted to the mirror, gazing into my reflection, searching for any indication that I was indeed myself. A few seconds passed before the edges of my reflection's mouth twisted into that same unnerving smile. It leaned in and said softly, "You're ready, kiddo." The voice was mine, yet it wasn't me. I slammed the door closed and I ran, pushing open my bedroom door. Mark was there, leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, that awful grin on his face. "Why are you doing this?" I gritted out, my voice shaking. "What do you want?" He merely laughed, that low, queasy sound. "I'm not doing anything," he told me, speaking in a low, strangely calm voice. "You're always doing this." He grasped my arm, his hold much stronger than I expected, and steered me toward my Aunt Mina's. It had been years since I'd last seen her. Why would he want to see her? "I want to go inside with you," he murmured into my ear. I barely heard him. We arrived at Mina's house. There was a frantic hope that leapt within me. Perhaps she knew. Perhaps she remembered the world as it ought to be. The world before Mark. I ran up to the door, knocking frantically until Mina opened it, her eyes opening wide with shock. "What are you doing here?" she asked, fear creeping into her voice. "You shouldn't have come." "Mina, please," I pleaded, grasping her hands. "You have to assist me. I don't know what is occurring. My memories, they're being altered. There is this man, Mark. He is taking the place of everyone I know. Mina stepped back, her face twisted in terror. "They're going to make you right," she breathed, her eyes flicking towards Mark, who stood behind me, his eyes following me with the same knowing grin. "They want to make you right before they wipe you out." "Wipe me out?" I breathed, my blood congealing in my veins. "What do you mean?" "Wipe me out of what?" Mina paused, her eyes shining with a desperate, entreating expression. "You're not the first," she whispered. "There was one before you, and they'll do it again. They'll replace you, the way they replaced her." "Another me? Replaced?" My head spun, attempting to follow through the urgency of her words. I was a replacement? For another person? I parted my lips to speak to her further, to require answers. But then, it occurred. Mina's eyes turned glassy, her muscles locked up, and her face blanked out. Her pupils expanded, her eyes losing all familiarity. It was as if a switch had been thrown, removing everything that made her. Her. "Mina?" I whispered, gently shaking her. "Mina, can you hear me?" She blinked, her eyes now vacant and clear. "Oh, hey," she said, her voice now cheerful and light, as if nothing was amiss. "What are you doing here?" She remembered nothing. She remembered no conversation. She remembered no fear in her eyes. She remembered no warning she had just issued me. She had been erased. Mark moved towards me, putting a hand on my shoulder. "See?" he whispered, his voice soothing and gentle. "I told you. You're always doing this." "Do what?" I breathed, my voice breaking. "What am I doing?" He grinned, a slow, predatory smile that made me shiver. "You always forget." "Celine, I'm going to start the story by saying that you should always be careful when running, even if it is in a popular place, or even if you have ran the trail a dozen times. It's always important to be aware of your surroundings. When I was in high school, I was an active runner. I would run every day after school, which allowed me to clear my head or just to get some clarity on things I had to decide. I had ran track on and off since middle school, so I could keep a good pace while running distance and even could run a pretty decent mile. This story takes place around the time I was a senior in high school, so there was a lot on my mind. Things like which college I was going to attend, or which colleges I could even get into, etc. Everything was changing pretty fast, and the amount of stress I had from school had finally gotten to me, so I had decided that I would go running in a park after school one day, just to give myself some time to think. The park was a pretty popular place. It had some really great trails and it helped it wasn't far off from my house, so I ran there pretty often. I always had felt safe while running in the park as I saw lots of people I knew and often always saw someone on the trails. There were some undeveloped areas you could run for some good scenic views where you could sometimes see deer and other animals. When I had gotten to the park, there were people there, but it wasn't as busy as usual, which didn't bother me as I had a lot on my mind and needed some time to run and just think. I did all of the things I usually did, like stretch and got ready to enter the woods. I put my headphones in, and the second I did, I blurred everything else out. I had started up my run with a nice light jog and passed some people and smiled like normal, until there was a man who greeted me with a smile that was extremely unsettling. If I had to describe it, I would say, imaging someone is looking down and they smile with no teeth while bringing their eyes up like in the movie Smile. It was creepy, but I nodded and waved like I normally would. I tried not to pay too much attention to the man and kept running as I was at a public park, and it wasn't unusual to see people. I had maybe ran a few laps around the common park area and kept passing the man in the same area, which struck me as weird as I had ran laps and not little ones either, like laps that took 5 to 8 minutes. Every time I would pass, I would politely nod and keep running. After a while, though, I started to think more and more about the situation. I began wondering why the man hadn't moved much from the original area I saw him in. At this point, I started seeing less and less people on the main trails, and it became later in the afternoon. The sun was covering in the clouds, and although it hadn't set, it was getting darker and gloomy as if a storm were coming. It was late April, so it was hot and rainy pretty frequently, and I decided that I would run a little bit longer until it started to rain, then I would head back to my car. I ran past the main parking lot and noticed that my car was the only car parked in the lot, so I knew I was alone and figured everyone knew the rain was coming and decided to leave. I ran toward the entrance and re-entered the running paths, passing the original place I had saw the man, and he was gone. I slowed down, catching my breath, and walked slightly for a few minutes, deeper and deeper in the trail. I was gathering my thoughts when I felt the feeling of being watched. I took my headphones out, and when I did, the park was silent. Scary. Silent. You couldn't hear trees blowing in the wind or cars from the main road. You could only hear the sound of my breath and the music blasting from my headphones. I looked around and didn't notice anything, so I kept walking, this time remaining vigilant as I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. As I was walking, I had my head down, and when I brought it up, I noticed the man from earlier walking in my direction, except this time, he wasn't smiling. He looked agitated, so I didn't even bother to smile or wave. I kept my head down, but noticed he was in jeans, boots, and a long-sleeved shirt. Something I hadn't noticed earlier. It wasn't unusual for someone to be wearing that, but it was in the low 80s and humid from rain days prior, so I knew he had to be hot. I kept walking for a minute, hoping that I was in the clear, and when I made it probably 20 feet away, I turned around to see where he had went, and to my surprise, he turned around also, walking in my direction. I picked up my pace a little and started jogging, leaving my headphones out this time. Every step I took, I heard more behind me. I glanced back and noticed the man jogging as well. I thought to myself, jogging in jeans, boots, and a long sleeve? I was so deep into the trail, though, that I was equidistant to both the start and finish. And if I kept going, that I would loop around to my car without having to turn around, but every step took me deeper and deeper into the woods further away from the main road. And although it seems dumb, I knew I could not have ran past the man if he was planning on doing something I didn't want to find out. I had close to a mile left on the trail, but every time I would pick up the pace, so would he. I kept hoping that he would stop to take a breath, but he never did. I tried to rationalize it, but I couldn't, especially since every time I picked up the pace, he was quick to as well. The area was much darker now, and the rain had started pouring. I was now drenched, and as I took a look back, the man was even closer than before. He was gaining on me, and I knew that I had to make a fast decision, so I went for it, in hopes that if he was following me, he wouldn't calculate my next move. I was approaching a scenic dip-off trail that had been overgrown and covered by leaves and sticks, leading downward on a slope like a tall hill. People had stopped running down it because of how steep it was, but it cut right down the main loop, saving probably 1/3 of the remainder. At this point, the only people who really knew about it were the people who had ran it before it became overgrown. I picked up my pace as fast as I could, running straight forward on the main path, and covered my face with my arms, cutting a sharp left, running through the twigs, vines, and leaves. I heard an audible gasp, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps. I ran down the hill as fast as I could, hoping that I had made a right decision, too afraid to look back until I reached the bottom of the hill. I had put a good distance between us, and when I turned around for the last time there, he was standing at the top of the hill, looking down at me, breathing heavily, looking annoyed and angry, like he was on the verge of a psychotic break. He was breathing heavily, covered in rain, and just staring at me with such anger. I didn't stick around and ran as fast as I could toward my car, hoping that when I got to my car, the story would end there. But when I approached my car, I quickly jumped into it, pulling out of the parking lot as fast as I could. I looked in the rear view, noticing the man on the edge of the woods staring, and it immediately sent chills down my spine as there were no other cars in the parking lot. I was shaking the whole car ride home, and was too afraid to tell my parents, because if they knew, they wouldn't let me run again, and that was my only form of solitude. I laid in bed all night in fear, thinking about his unsettling smile and how creepy he was. I thought about how I should have known something was wrong sooner. I finally fell asleep after replaying all of the scenarios in my head and was woken up at 3 a.m. by my stepdad, who had just gotten home from work. I heard him enter the house in a panic, screaming for me, and when I sat up, he came into my room asking if I was okay, and when I asked why, he pointed outside. I quickly went outside to see my car door opened, and my car had been gone through, seats slashed and a busted back window. I was confused as nothing had been stolen, but just to destroy my car was strange. I started thinking about who would do something like that or why. We lived in a secluded area with only 2 neighbors, which lived far enough from us to allow us to be loud and have gatherings, but close enough to run to in case of an emergency, so nobody had heard anything. Aside from the glass and cut seats, the only thing sitting on my seat was my registration. It suddenly dawned on me that when I had ran to my car earlier that day, that I jumped straight in and took off. I didn't unlock my car. It was older, so it had to be manually locked and unlocked with a key, but I didn't unlock it. I knew it had to be the man from earlier. He must have looked at the registration and gotten my name and address from it. I moved to college shortly after, and my family sold the house when I was in college, but it still makes me wonder what else he would have done if he would have gotten me, or even worse, broken into my house. The Valley. Hi, 3 Reddit followers. I am sorry for being gone for so long. You know how life can be. Devastating. I am writing this and posting it because I need answers, and I think it's a way for me to cope. Or at least, that's what my therapist said. Bear with me, I am not much of a storyteller. So, about a month ago, me, my best friend, and boyfriend went about an hour southwest of where we live to visit our friend. For the sake of privacy, I will call them Colby, Vincent, and Ashley. Ashley and I grew up together. She is kind, easygoing, and a crazy-ass sense of humor. Colby is my boyfriend of almost 2 years. He is patient, protective, and honestly the best person I know. And Vincent is spunky. He walks around wearing cowboy boots. He is loyal, personable, and adventurous. Vincent and Colby are best friends. So we've all become really close. We play Xbox together, camp, get drunk, etc. Part of the way we bonded so fast and got so close was because we all share a love of the paranormal. Shocking, I know. One weekend, like many others, Colby, Ashley, and I pack up in Colby's car to make the drive down to see Vincent and do our usual activities, getting drunk and ghost hunting. The town Vincent lives in is weird. I don't know how to explain it. It's just weird. Stuck in a different time. Almost everyone there is old, or been there since they were born and will never leave. It was an old mining town, and the people there share stories of their hard times working the mines and how business boomed and crashed within years of each other. But what almost everyone shares stories of is the Valley. A canyon just off the 2-lane road referred to by locals as the freeway is what the people in town call the Valley, a dead-end canyon stretching no more than 15 miles. This is where all the mines were and still are. Now the town is dry and cold, the kind of cold that cuts through your skin and into your bone. The wind never stops. Summer, winter, Spring or fall, it's always windy, especially in the valley. The wind whips off the rock walls and roars through the dead trees. Some nights in town, the wind coming out of the valley sounds like screams. The drive to see Vincent was as boring and ugly as usual. I sleep most the ride while Colby and Ashley bullshit about politics, religion, etc. I drift off to the start of another discussion I don't care enough to be a part of. Just as quickly as I'm asleep, I wake up to the sound of the wind hitting our car so hard I fear we might fly off the road. That's how I know we've made it. We meet Vincent at his house and make up a plan for the night, the spot we want to get dinner at, and where we want to ghost hunt. It's a weekend, but in town it's dead. The hum of the neon sign outside the restaurant we come to every time we're in town is the only thing breaking the silence except the damn wind. As we sit down and order our usual dinner, Vincent tells us that he has somewhere he wants to show us. It's just up the valley. It's called the Devil's Playhouse. Just as those words escape his lips, the waitress on her way over with our pitcher drops and shatters the whole thing. She sheepishly apologizes, sweeps it up, but stops halfway. Did I hear you say the Devil's Playhouse? Sorry, it's just I am new into town and have heard the rumors of that place, did you know? Vincent shoots her a look that's quick to shut her up, and she leaves. I asked him what the stories were about this place. He leans in close to us and whispers, "Well, as you guys know, the valley, well, actually, the whole town was built for the mines. So when the miners settled here, some weird people came with them." He glances around to make sure nobody is listening and lowers his voice even more. "Well, the people would take, like, horses, cows, even the miners' fucking pets, and take them up to their spot and slit their throats and fucked up shit like that. They said they did it for the devil." He clears his throat and leaned back. "But that's just an old rumor, who knows what happened, but either way, the place is freaky." Ashley looks around at us in a deep voice and says, "That's what I'm going to do to you guys if you don't Venmo me for dinner." I laugh and roll my eyes. We finish dinner, pack up in the car. "Fuck," Colby says, feeling around in his pockets. "I lost my zins. Can we stop at a gas station, please?" Vincent pulls off into a gas station that consists of one pump and a small shop. We go inside and I'm browsing around when I see Ashley bump into a tall, lanky, awkward-looking man, knocking the items in his hand to the floor. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she says. The man turns around with a big smile on his face and says, "No worries, ma'am," and picks up his car keys and a pack of cigarettes up off the floor. I watch as he walks out to the parking lot, gets in his nice brand new truck and drives away. Ashley has moved on to the next aisle when I realize I'm staring. Vincent walks up next to me. "You ready?" I asked him who that man was, and he says, "Lance Cornell. Dude's nice as hell. He lives at the mouth of the valley. Funny enough, he owns the beer. You know the place we had dinner at tonight?" I smile, and we all walk out the gas station and load back up into the car. In the car, Colby's puts a hand on my thigh and rubs his finger against my jeans. Ashley whips her head around from the front and says, "You know what I think I've heard of this place? Yeah, like some kids went missing hiking up here and were never seen from again." She narrows her eyes and looks right at me with a mincing glance. "Hey, stop that. She's lying to you. Nobody's gone missing." Vincent gives me a smile in the rearview mirror. The sun is just starting to go down when we get there. We're swapping scary stories the drive up, but as soon as we cross the threshold, the stories stop and a sense of dread fills the space the stories held. Vincent drives up to a gate with a giant no trespassing sign on it. "Well, this is it. Now we just hike up a bit. Watch for cars too. This is like super illegal." Me and Ashley share a glance and she smiles with her reassuring kind smile and we start walking. Halfway up, Colby takes my hand and winks at me. He says, "How you feeling? Scared?" "Don't be. I won't let anything happen to you. Plus, all this stuff is total bullshit, babe." He smiles and jogs up a little to catch up with the others. I stay behind. I am winded, cold, and uneasy. I hear a snap of a twig behind me and whip around. Holy fuck, what was that? My friends turn around and watch as a bunny crosses the trail behind me. "False alarm, sorry guys." Vincent rolls his eyes and laughs. After a short 20-minute walk, the sun is completely set in the valley, and we turn on our flashlights to see the beast of a building standing in front of us. An abandoned mining building. Must have been storage or something. because the ones we drove past on the way in don't even hold a candle to this. The wind going through the windows makes it look like the building itself is shriving in the cold air of the wind. Wow, Ashley says with a grin. Well, come on in, mi casa es su casa, says Vincent as he stands in the doorway. All the windows and doors are gone. There is a hole in the floor that looks like it leads somewhere, but however people were getting down there has been gone for quite some time. Dude, imagine there is just someone living down there, Ashley says, and nudges me with a smile. What the fuck? What an odd thing to say. Ashley and Colby are taking pictures on her digital camera she carries with her everywhere. The odd thing is the place has no graffiti. It's actually clean. No glass or anything, I say out loud. Yeah. Well, nobody ever comes up here because, well, the cops are bored in a town like this, Vincent said like he was reading my mind. All right, fuckers, I say we split up, Colby says. All right, gang, let's look for clues. Ashley copies in a teasing voice. My heart starts to race. The building is only one floor if you exclude the hole in the ground. Just stay on the main floor and keep your light on just in case. Vincent tells us we all nod and walk our separate ways. I begin to walk around the corner of the general area we're in. I am looking around, still amazed at the cleanliness of this place. No dust, no leaves, nothing. It's wild. I turn around to see Colby right there. Ah, he screams. I shove him away and smack his chest. Idiot. He leans in and tries to kiss me, and as I lean into him, I hear aloud, "What the hell?" Ashley sounds scared. We run over to find her looking at the ground with fear in her eyes. We pan our flashlights down to what she's looking at. A dead fucking rabbit. Fresh, bright red blood pouring out of the hole in its body where its head used to be. I look away and throw up in my mouth. Dude, what the fuck? Colby says. What the fuck is right? Ashley says, sounding scared. Let's leave, I want to leave. Please, this is fucked up. This shit is like real, like, what the fuck? We need to leave. It's the bunny from the trail. What are we waiting for? Ashley screams at us. I swallow my throw up and start walking to the door. The boys are standing there staring at it. As I walk away, I start to lose sight of them. It's so dark that I don't know how people would navigate without a source of light. And it's so quiet, almost peaceful. Wait a fucking minute, it's so quiet. What happened to the wind? My heart drops to my stomach, and a pit joins it. It's like we all notice it at the same time, the silence. Deafening. No rubbing of tree branches, no bugs, no hum of electricity, no sound of shoes on the floor, and most definitely no wind. Wow, Colby says. Can we go now? Asks Ashley. I pan my flashlight around to each of their faces. My heart is beating so loud, it's filling the silence. Chill, Vincent says. Don't freak yourself out, okay? It's probably nothing. Let's go. Okay, you're right, this was a mistake. He takes a step back, and as he does, I see a figure in the back hidden in the darkness take a step behind him. The figure smacks Vincent's phone out of his hands and onto the floor, silencing my heartbeat from my ears. Holy fuck! Wait, what? Vincent! Ashley screams. We all panic, getting closer to each other. Just then, the sound of footsteps on the floor running, no sprinting towards us. Colby yanks me out of the way, but he's not fast enough to grab Ashley, the figure running, picks her up in a single swoop, and I hear her cry out as his voice gets more and more distant. Ash, I start to say, as Colby covers my mouth with his hand. We back up into the darkness, moving as quickly and quietly as we can. Suddenly, the floor underneath my feet is gone, and we fall right into the hole in the floor. Slamming my head against the cold, damp cement floor, I knock myself unconscious. I wake up to the sound of sobs and screams. It's not dark anymore. The main room of the building is lit by candles burning and surrounding me, us in a circle. We're all tied up, bound by our hands and feet, sitting next to each other. 3 hooded figures stand far enough away. The candlelight isn't showing their face. What do you fucks want with us? Colby yells. You please let us go, begs Ashley. One of the men steps forward and into the candlelight. A bald man who looks to be 60 is carrying the head of the rabbit, the blood still dripping on the floor. He holds the head above each of us while muttering under his breath. The blood is dropping onto my face. Warm, wet, sticky, the metallic smell filling my nose. I gag and cry and shake and all the things. After the put the blood on Colby mine and Ashley's heads and faces, they stop at Vincent. One of the hooded figures step forward. A short, fat, hairy man in his 40s reaches out a hand towards Vincent. He mumbles something under his breath. Vincent, crying, looks at us and back at him and takes his hand. Tears streaming down his face, he says, "I can't do this. Please don't make me do this, please." "They're my friends, you assholes." The last robed man steps forward and the strong stench of cigarettes follows him. It's the man from the gas. He grabs Vincent's shoulder and says, "Vincent, we talked about this. Think of your mother, your sister. Do it for them. I promised you something, and I would never break a promise." Vincent wipes away the tears and backs up into the darkness. "Vincent!" Colby screams. "What are you doing to him? What are you doing to us?" Tears are gushing out of my eyes as I see the fear on Colby's face. Before Colby can say another word, his throat is slit, and blood is spewing out all over his clothes. He looks at me. His eyes widen with fear and his body slumps over. "To appease," they all say in unison. Just then, Vincent returns with container of lighter fluid. He drops it to the floor as he falls to his knees. A blood-curdling scream escapes his lips. "No! I told you not him! You told me you wouldn't hurt him! Please don't!" He is shaking and crying and holding Colby's limp body, his blood soaking onto Vincent's clothes. Cornell says something under his breath, and the other two drag Vincent away while he is kicking and screaming. Suddenly, the screaming stops. I am shaking. My heart is shattered. I'm so shocked I almost forget Ashley is next to me until I hear a whimper and see her bloody and shivering, a piss stain showing on her pants. The two men return, one of them picking up the gasoline while the other picks up matches. They begin to make a ring around us, and just as they're about to light it, Cornell mumbles something to the other two, and they pick me up and untie me. I try to run over to Ashley, but they yank me back. "No, wait, I want to see her, please. What are you doing to my friends? Please, no." I can barely see through my tears. "Run," the bald man says. "Leave this town and don't ever come back." Before I can dispute the circle around, Ashley is ablaze, and she is screaming, screeching, crying. I can't take it anymore, so I run. I leap out the window, fall to my knees, but I don't stop. I get up, the wind is back. It's whipping the tears flowing down my face. My feet give under me, and I fall down the mountainside. I slam my head on the ground, my hands and bloody and scraped. I don't stop. I get up. I am just at the car when I stop. I turn back around and look up. I can hear loud chanting, rhythmic, and a scream like I've never heard. Something deep, something guttural, primal. A howl of sorts, and then light. A bright flash of light, and then it's all gone. And suddenly I can smell cigarettes. I get into Vincent's car. The thing is old. It barely stars, but it does, thank God. I sit there for a second, looking up at the building, and then I scream. I slam my hands on the horn. I cry, and I cry, and I cry. I slam on the gas and don't stop until I'm out of the valley, out of the town, until I'm back in my town. I show up at my local police station covered in blood. I tell them everything, and they write it down and speed away. Sirens on, backup arriving, the whole 9 yards. They don't find anything but a circle of dust and ash on the ground. The police told the parents what happened, and I've been questioned multiple times, although my story never changed. They've held 3 funerals, but I didn't attend Vincent's. I couldn't and will never enter that town again. I didn't attend anyone's, so now I'm here, alone, haunted by the memories of that terrible night, in a fuck ton of therapy, on the news, in pain and suffering. I just don't understand why they didn't kill me. I wish they would have ended it all and killed me. Please kill me. Nobody believes me, but I know what happened. It all happened in that fucking valley. Returning from the Amazon was one of the most exhausting and exhilarating experiences of my life. That trip to South America had been the perfect escape from my suffocating routine as a rising attorney in the United States. After years of hard work, I'd secured a solid position at Marston and Associates, and with a recent promotion offer, life finally seemed to be heading in the right direction. But since I returned, Something hasn't felt right. It began with a faint itch on my left arm just below the elbow. At first, I thought it was just a mosquito bite, inevitable after weeks in the Amazon rainforest. I didn't pay much attention to it. I applied some ointment, took an antihistamine, and carried on. But the itch wouldn't go away. 2 days later, it worsened. The small red spot on my arm started swelling, throbbing, as if something alive was inside. Every touch felt like fire burning beneath my skin. At the office, the situation became unbearable. I shifted constantly in my chair, unable to focus on anything but the desperate need to scratch. I clawed at my arm under the desk, trying to hide it, but it was no use. The fabric of my blouse rubbed against the irritated skin, amplifying the agony. "Elizabeth, are you okay?" Clara, a coworker, asked. "Just an allergy, nothing serious," I lied, forcing a smile. She raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical, but didn't press further. I knew I was drawing attention. My boss, Mr. Marston, frequently walked past my desk, watching me out of the corner of his eye. I couldn't let this jeopardize my promotion, but the pain was becoming unbearable. When the workday finally ended, I rushed home. I closed the door to my apartment, dropped my bag, and went straight to the bathroom. I looked in the mirror and rolled up my sleeve. My heart froze. Where there had been a small red mark, there was now a dark swelling with a black, hardened center, like tree bark. The skin around it was cracked, oozing a yellowish liquid with a nauseating smell. It was as if my skin was rotting before my eyes. I grabbed the strongest ointment I had, but as soon as I touched the wound, the pain exploded. I screamed, tears streaming down my face. The next morning, I went straight to the hospital. I wasn't the kind of person to wait until the last minute to seek help. My mother used to say, "Elizabeth, you're so paranoid you'll die of old age because nothing will ever catch you off guard." At the hospital, the doctor examined the wound with a mix of curiosity and discomfort. He called in another doctor, who then called in 2 more. They all stared at my arm like it was a nightmare brought to life. "It's a tropical disease," the doctor said after several long minutes. "We'll run some tests." They sent me home with antibiotics and painkillers, but I knew that wasn't enough. Something was growing inside me. That night, I woke up to excruciating pain. It felt like something was moving under my skin, crawling and digging. I ran to the bathroom mirror and tore off the bandages. The wound was now a deep hole, filled with a gelatinous yellow substance. In the center, something moved. My hands trembled as I grabbed tweezers and inserted them into the hole. When I pulled, something came out. It was a worm. Small, white, but alive. It writhed between the tweezers, and I threw it into the sink, nearly vomiting. But when I looked back at the wound, I saw there were more. So many more. The days that followed were hell. I woke up drenched in sweat, my head pounding as if it would explode. The pain in my arm was no longer something I could ignore. It consumed my entire body. The wound grew at an alarming rate. Initially, it was just a foul, black, gaping hole. Now it spread like a cancer, devouring the surrounding flesh, which peeled away in chunks. My clothes clung to my arm, soaked with the viscous liquid that oozed constantly. I spent hours in front of the bathroom mirror, inspecting the pit my arm had become. It was as if something inside was alive. Small ripples in the decaying flesh, like waves on a contaminated lake, revealed their presence. By the 3rd day, after pulling out the 3rd worm with tweezers, I realized I was trapped in an endless cycle. I removed them, but more appeared, always more. I couldn't sleep. Whenever I closed my eyes, I felt the creatures moving inside me, digging deeper into my flesh. I became obsessed. I spent sleepless nights on the bathroom floor, extracting worms with tweezers, needles, anything that could reach them. My body was exhausted, but my mind wouldn't stop. For every one I removed, 2 seemed to take its place, and the sound. At first I thought it was in my head, but it wasn't. It was a low, wet rustling coming from my arm, the sound of something scraping against flesh, chewing, burrowing. By the 5th day, the nightmare reached a new level. My left hand went numb. I tried to move my fingers, but they wouldn't respond. When I looked at my arm, the swelling had spread. The skin around it was translucent, almost see-through, revealing long white shapes writhing beneath, rivers of larvae flowing through my body. I vomited on the bathroom floor, the stench of bile mixed with the rotting smell of my arm, making the air unbreathable. I knew they were growing, and I knew they wouldn't stop. It felt like a legion of burning needles was piercing my skin, deeper and deeper each time. The wound was growing alarmingly. At first it was just a black, fetid hole in the center of the swelling. Now it spread like cancer, advancing through the surrounding flesh, which was rotting and falling apart in pieces. My clothes started to stick to my arms, soaked with the viscous liquid that kept dripping constantly. The smell was nauseating, a mix of rotten meat and something chemical, acidic, that seemed to burn my nostrils. I spent hours in front of the bathroom mirror, inspecting that hole that had become my arm. It was as if something inside it was moving. Small ripples in the rotting flesh, like waves on an infected lake, showed that they were there. On the 3rd day, after pulling out the 3rd worm with tweezers, I realized I was caught in an endless cycle. I would remove them, but more would appear, always more. I cried out of frustration and disgust. "Get out of me! Get out!" I screamed, my voice hoarse and desperate, but the worms didn't obey. Each night was worse than the last. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I could feel the creatures moving inside me. The mere thought that they were digging through my flesh kept me awake. I became obsessed. I spent the night sitting on the bathroom floor, pulling out worms with tweezers, a needle, anything I could reach. My body was exhausted, but my mind never stopped. Every time I pulled one out, it seemed like 2 more appeared. I began to hear sounds. At first, I thought it was just in my head, but it wasn't. It was a low rustling noise, like something wet brushing against flesh, gnawing, burrowing. I knew they were growing. On the 5th day, hell reached a new level. My left hand began to tingle. Then, it went numb. I tried to move my fingers, but they wouldn't respond. When I looked at, I start. My skin was greenish and damp, gleaming with a sickly, oily sheen. I called an Uber to take me to the hospital. When the driver stopped in front of the building, I hesitated for a moment. I tried to cover my arm with a cloth to hide the deplorable state it was in, but the fabric quickly became soaked with the yellowish liquid that leaked incessantly. I got in the car, hoping he wouldn't notice. "Good morning," I tried to say, but my voice came out hoarse, almost inaudible. The driver, a middle-aged man with a friendly expression, smiled through the rearview mirror, but his expression changed as soon as the smell reached him. "Are you okay?" he asked, wrinkling his nose and cracking the window a bit. "It's just an infection. I'm going to the hospital." He nodded but kept the windows open throughout the entire ride. I saw him rub his nose several times, and his glance in the rearview mirror was filled with distrust. The smell was getting worse. It was the smell of death. When I finally arrived at the hospital, I staggered through the front door. The people in the waiting room instinctively moved away, some covering their mouths, others wrinkling their faces in disgust. I was taken directly to the emergency room. The doctor who attended to me was the same as before, but his serious expression indicated that he knew the situation had gotten out of control. He could barely hide his own reaction to the smell. "Elizabeth, what happened?" he asked, while putting on gloves and a mask. I don't know. It's getting worse. It's growing." He looked at my arm, now practically unrecognizable. The wound had turned into a grotesque opening filled with necrotic flesh and viscous secretions. The center pulsed as if it had a life of its own, and the edges were covered in small worms crawling in and out, as if they were digging tunnels. It was as if they were digging tunnels. "We need to act immediately. This is no longer just an ordinary infection," he said, calling for other doctors. I was rushed into the operating room. The nurses' faces were a mix of professionalism and horror, as if they were trying not to think about what they were seeing. The room was cold, and the bright lights reflected off the metal surgical instruments. "We'll need to amputate the arm, Elizabeth," the doctor said, holding my healthy hand to try to comfort me. "There's no other option. It's spreading too quickly." I simply nodded. I no longer had the strength to protest. All I wanted was for it to stop. They sedated me partially, but I remained conscious enough to feel the first incision. When the scalpel cut into the flesh around the wound, a collective scream echoed through the room. Larvae were raining down. From the cut, a torrent of white worms exploded like a geyser. They were larger than the ones I had seen before, thicker, almost translucent, with quick and frantic movements. The nurses recoiled, some screaming, others dropping instruments on the floor. "My God," murmured the doctor, while trying to stay calm. The worms fell to the floor and began to spread throughout the room, crawling in all directions. The stench emanating from them was even stronger, a wet, rotting smell that seemed to fill every corner of the space. The doctor continued cutting, desperate to sever my arm from the rest of my body. But the worms didn't stop. They appeared from every side, burrowing into my flesh as if they were living roots, connected to my own body. The pain was unbearable, even with the sedatives. I could feel every movement, every bite, every slide of their viscous forms. "We need to finish this now," the doctor shouted, wielding a surgical saw to cut through the bone. But as he began to saw, more worms came out, this time faster, as if trying to escape. One climbed up his glove, crawling to his wrist. "Get this off me," he shouted, as another nurse tried to help him. The operating room was in chaos. The floor was covered in blood, pus, and worms. Surgical instruments were scattered around, and the nurses didn't know where to run. I could feel that this wasn't going to end there. The arm wasn't the only place they were. They had already spread throughout my entire body. "Doctor," I whispered, my voice almost inaudible. "It's no use. They're everywhere." He looked at me, his face pale and filled with horror. For a moment, I thought he was going to pass out. "Elizabeth, I'm so sorry." And then my vision darkened. I looked at my hands, but they were no longer mine. My skin was full of holes, and worms were coming in and out as if I were just a vessel. It's my fault he died, honestly. I'm 16, and I was supposed to be watching him outside. We live out in the countryside, some southern county no one cares about in the middle of bumfuck nowhere. And Rudy is always allowed to go out without a leash because he's trained to not go too far and come right back after doing his business. He's a chocolate lab with a red collar and the biggest, sweetest wet eyes you've ever seen. He was, at least. I let Rudy out after putting in a pizza, home alone since my parents were at work. As he played around our large property, I sat on the porch and watched videos on my phone. Suddenly I jumped up, having forgotten about my food, and ran back inside. I'd burnt an entire frozen pepperoni pizza, and I was cussing up a storm, taking it out the oven and trying to figure out what I was going to tell my parents so I wouldn't be scolded for wasting food. I forgot about my dog for a while and rummaged through the fridge for something else to eat as the sun went down. That's when I heard the most god-awful sound. Tires screeching on the road at the end of the driveway, a vehicle grinding to a sudden halt, just as the loud, pained yelp of our family's best friend rang out in the humid evening air. I ran out the house, across the lawn, down the drive, and fell to my knees where Rudy was lying on the road with his chest and stomach caved in. The car was gone, speeding down the road, leaving tire tracks and gore over poor Rudy's crushed abdomen. I cried harder than I've ever cried in my entire life as I watched him squirm and whine in agony before finally the light faded from his big brown eyes. Rudy had gone up the drive for no real reason. He usually stuck to the woods around our house, digging up holes or peeing in bushes. He never had interest in exploring the road, and he never once tried. If I had told him to come in already, he would be alive to this day. My parents mourned deeply, and I had the sense they were blaming me as well. A week passed and we tried to move on. But then one evening I went outside to walk around the yard and talk to my friend from school on the phone. We were laughing about something or the other, and I was enjoying the cool breeze on my skin as the sun set overhead, when suddenly I had this weird feeling. the feeling you get when you're being watched. I looked around, then my eyes fell on the driveway, which was surrounded on both sides by trees and curved sort of to the left, so that you couldn't see the road from the front lawn. What I could see, however, several yards away, was a chocolate lab standing still as a statue at the bend, under the shadows of the trees. One with a red collar, tire tracks imprinted on his side, blood-soaked fur, a completely crushed and mangled face, and entrails hanging from his gashed open stomach. My breath caught in my throat and I felt like time went to a standstill. My friend asking me if I was still on the phone became white noise as I stared at what seemed like Rudy, and he stared right back, unmoving. We had buried him, far out in the woods where he couldn't be seen from our property, as a reminder of what we lost. He was definitely dead. There was no doubt about that. Was I hallucinating? It was starting to get dark after all. Maybe my imagination was playing tricks. I turned away from the horrible sight as I choked back a sob. I rubbed my eyes, and after taking a deep breath, I looked again. He was gone. I returned to my phone call and quickly went back inside the house, choosing to play it off as my mind fucking with me due to the guilt of Rudy's passing. But things were never the same after that. Since my parents are too busy working to drive me, I catch the bus each morning to school. That means walking all the way down our winding driveway and waiting at the spot Rudy was hit for that yellow bus full of obnoxiously loud teenagers to pull up. Every time I walked down the drive, I felt uneasy. The trees lining the gravel path on both sides blotted out the sun and covered me in shadow. Nature was silent and still, when usually birds were singing and squirrels were skittering up trees. I felt like I wasn't alone. I waited for the bus and I felt the skin on the back of my neck burn. I turned around and saw him, closer this time. Rudy. His corpse just stood there and watched me. He didn't so much as twitch, blink, or move his tail. I didn't know what to do. He was blocking the way back home, and the house across the street was for sale, meaning the closest neighbor was yards away. An overwhelming sense of fear enveloped me, and I staggered back into the road, expecting him to move at any moment, to lunge at me and attack. After all, if he wasn't some sort of zombie, then what was he? The school bus screeched to a stop dangerously close to me, and this scared me so bad I screamed and fell back on my ass in the middle of the road. I had been so terrified that I didn't even notice it approaching, and apparently the driver hadn't noticed me until the last minute for some reason. When I got my bearings and stood up, I felt utterly flustered. I looked away from the driver's angry face in the windshield to the driveway, and Rudy had vanished again. When I got on the bus, the driver yelled at me, asking if I had a death wish, and a few of my classmates made fun of me, but I didn't care. I was absolutely terrified. My dog was haunting me, and its presence felt hostile, like it wanted me to suffer the same gruesome fate since I couldn't help him. I wasn't able to focus on class at all that day. When the bus dropped me off that afternoon, I stood and waited until it left, then booked it down the driveway. I felt silly, but at the same time I didn't want to be there long enough to see him again. When I ate dinner with my parents that night, I was distant and moody, and my mom noticed. "I made your favorite dinner, and you're just pushing it around with that glum look on your face," she had said. "Honey, what's wrong?" I told her that I was hallucinating Rudy in his post-mortem form at that. I could tell by the looks on my mom and dad's face that they were intensely uncomfortable at the subject. They had been close to Rudy too. He was an old dog, and they had adopted him just before I was born. Yes, he was that old. I just wish I'd stopped seeing it. I finished my vent with that. After a short moment of silence, Dad grumbled without even looking at me. "Son, you've been watching those freaky movies at night and barely getting any sleep. You can't be surprised you're seeing zombies when you're running on 3 hours of sleep and marathoning every zombie movie ever made." "Your dad's right," Mom agreed when she saw the way my face balled up in frustration. "Plus, you've been sleeping past your alarms and missing the bus almost every day now. I want you to start going to bed earlier and take a break from the horror genre in the meantime, okay?" "Yeah, okay." I thought that maybe they were right. I mean, Dad was definitely exaggerating about the 3 hours of sleep thing, but I probably should lay off the scary shit for a while. I don't think I could stomach it anyway, after what's been happening. Despite me following my parents' advice, things got worse. I heard scratching at the door at night, and the whimpers and whines of a dog. My bedroom is on the first floor and closest to the front door, whereas my parents slept like a log upstairs. Even if my mom wasn't a heavy sleeper, she probably wouldn't be able to hear it over the sound of Dad's booming snores that reverberated through the whole house. I laid there in bed, too scared to get up and check it out. I knew there shouldn't be any dog out there. As far as we knew, no one around us owned dogs. Still, I told myself a neighbor's dog got out and had snuck into our yard so I wouldn't shit myself. Let me tell you right now, I'm not a horror movie protagonist, I'm a coward, and I'm not the type to go investigating. I run and hide, I don't fight. So no, I wasn't going to creep into the kitchen and peek out the window to see what the hell was pawing at our front door. I did not want to see my dead dog again. But as I listened to Rudy whine and whimper, I thought something sounded off about his voice. I can't describe it. It just didn't sound like him. It was a bit gruff and a little too deep in pitch, like a mockery of our dog. Then again, he was dead, so I understood his vocal cords weren't going to be in good shape. Or maybe his body was possessed by a demon. Either way, the thought of this made it very difficult to fall asleep. Paying attention at school was starting to become harder than ever before as I lost sleep due to this. My grades suffered, and my parents were threatening me with therapy, or grief counseling as they called it. If anyone at school somehow got wind of that, I'd be cooked. I could already imagine what the guys would say. It all came to a head when one night, the scratching and whimpering started up again. I decided that I had had enough and stormed out of bed towards the kitchen. I was going to be a horror movie protagonist if only to get some sleep, I'd decided. After a few stomps towards the direction of the front door, the sound stopped, as if Rudy, or whatever it was, heard me coming. I started to lose my nerve. When I got inside the kitchen, I tiptoed to the window and craned my neck to look out at the porch. My blood ran cold. Rudy stood unnervingly still on the porch, facing the window. He looked deader than a doornail, and now that he was closer, I could see his hollowed-out eyes and how his gray tongue hung limply out of his dislocated jaw. I jumped back and yelled, running upstairs to wake my parents. I could barely formulate a sentence as I shook them awake, sweaty and terrified. Dad led the way, wielding a Louisville Slugger, and Mom and I stayed at the top of the stairs. A phone clutched tight in her hands in case she needed to call the police. We listened tensely as Dad threw open the door, shouting. However, there were no sounds of any altercation to follow it, just some confused mumbling from him. We met him in the kitchen a few minutes later, and he told me there was nothing out there. "What did you say you saw again?" Mom asked me, looking skeptical. "A man?" "No, not a man," I began. "You said he's out there," Dad snapped. "I meant he, as in Rudy." I watched them give each other looks, my face getting hot as I realized how this looked. "Dylan, we all miss Rudy," Mom said with a sigh. "No, it's not like that," I begged. "He's been haunting me. He shows up." "It's your guilty conscience." Dad cut me off, a mix of frustration and concern on his face. "I have nothing to be guilty about. It was an accident." I ran to my room so they wouldn't see me cry. I locked the door behind me, knowing Mom would try to come in. When she tried the doorknob, she groaned. "We're going to talk about this after school tomorrow, and we're taking you to a shrink." I heard their muffled voices complain about me all the way up the stairs. I cried into my pillow like a baby. I just missed my damn dog, and I missed having a good night's sleep and not having my parents think I was going crazy. The next day, I was so tired I felt like I could pass out. I missed the school bus for the millionth time, so Mom once again ran late to work, driving me there. I could tell she was pissed. She was silent the whole time. I went into the office to check in late, and I saw one of the guys sitting there. "What are you doing here late?" Toby, one of my friends, snorted. "You look like shit." "What are you doing out of class?" I asked with irritation as I signed my name onto a clipboard in front of the receptionist, who was always talking to her boyfriend on the school's phone. "Got in trouble," Toby shrugged. "Already?" I looked at him judgmentally for already being sent to the office so early in the school day. "Whatever, man," Toby scoffed. At least I don't play with dead dogs. What? I whirled on him, ready to kick his ass for saying anything negative about Rudy. Easy. Toby threw his hands up, genuinely surprised by my reaction. If you're so sensitive about it, why does your family keep trying to use him as a prank? I mean, you gotta admit it's weird, dude. Alexis rides your bus and she keeps talking about how your dad keeps putting your dog on the end of the road. What's that about anyways? Is he trying to scare them? Does he think they're kindergartners? What are you talking about? The room felt hot all of a sudden. I was sweating as I tried to connect the dots but couldn't. My dad is at work every day by the time the bus comes and we buried Rudy in an empty field somewhere. Toby frowned. You know, now that I think about it, I saw your dad once, right? He's this big buff guy. Alexis keeps saying it's a skinny guy with pasty white skin and a black hood. So that wasn't your dad moving Rudy around. Didn't you guys get Rudy stuffed, or what's it called, taxidermied? I stared in silence for a moment as I realized what exactly was going on. What did she see him do? She said today that he came out of the woods and left it there at the end of the driveway. Toby seemed to get nervous as he caught on to how weird the situation was. Then he just smiled as the bus went by. She thought maybe it was some kind of prank to scare the people on the bus, since it was like a freaky taxidermy job. I mean, his guts were hanging out. People don't do that when they get their animals stuffed, though, do they? We never had him stuffed, I cried out. Everything else happened so fast. I harassed the receptionist into allowing me to call my mom, who then called my dad. My mom came by to pick me up, and we went to the house with the police. They searched everywhere and found that Rudy's grave had been dug up and that someone had been hiding under our house. That's where Rudy's body was found. The man had left him under here when he heard me coming and hid himself in there too. Dad never thought to check under there. He had been the one to scratch on the door and mimic the sound of a dog whining and whimpering almost to a T. They found the nut job hiding out in the for sale house across the street. He'd broken in and had been living there for weeks. When he was taken into custody, he admitted he'd been watching us and that he had dug up Rudy, stuffed him himself, but purposely left in gruesome details like an intestine and bits of broken bone, and used his corpse to torment me. When I wasn't looking, he would place Rudy out in the open and hide in the trees, and when I left, he would take him back. Then when I kept getting up late, he would just display Rudy for the kids on the bus and enjoy their understandably freaked reactions. That's why he always seemed so still when I looked at him. It's because he was stuffed. I couldn't believe it. The worst part about it was the fact that the asshole was also responsible for killing Rudy. The police told us that he had laughed as he openly told them that he'd laid dog treats on the road to lure him, got into his car, and ran him over. He hid the car in a field by the empty house, which you could access by a wide trail so that no one would know he was living there. It's how he got around, buying cheap beer and the things he needed to stuff our dog with. He was a mechanic with a weird hobby, apparently, and he'd recently lost his house and had been living in his car before he came all the way out here to squat in that house. And why did he do all this? No reason. Absolutely no reason other than the fact he was fucking psycho and wanted to torture some kid for fun. He was charged for trespassing, harassment, animal abuse, and some other bullshit I can't remember. We moved shortly after because Mom didn't feel comfortable with the fact that asshole knew where we lived. I feel so dumb, thinking Rudy was a ghost or zombie or something like that. I never investigated or stuck around long enough to notice anything amiss. More than anything, I feel angry. I hope that dick has a life full of nothing but misery and misfortune waiting for him. If it weren't for Toby, who knows how long he would have kept it up? Maybe he would have escalated things and tried breaking into our house next to place Rudy in there. He was clearly not dealing with a full deck, if his wild eyes and crooked, creepy grin were anything to go off of. But at least Rudy can finally rest in peace. We buried him again, and this time, Mom and Dad spent the money to place him in a proper pet cemetery. Sometimes I go there and lay treats on his grave. He will always be a good boy to me. I sit here looking at the blue painted walls with the same vintage movie posters I've had since I was 13. This room has been my comfort zone since I can remember. Living in the basement, I have always had a sense of independence, even at early ages. I could customize it to my design. I never let my parents' views bleed in here. I am a religious person, but I don't need a cross on every wall, proverbs on every mantle, and paintings of Christ everywhere in between. Down here I had freedom, but now it seems like this will be my tomb. I write this not only to get out the raving anxieties eating at my insides like a starved tiger, but to perhaps rationalize what is the completely irrational. My parents are the typical conservative Christian type, real Republican poster children. Growing up, my Sundays were completely haunted by 3-hour-long morning sermons from a pastor with eyes that wandered to a disturbingly downward. You would think my mom's eyes were on her chest if you even saw one conversation between the two. The rest of my early childhood ends up being a blur of Sunday studies and so many prayers that when I even see a plate of food being set on a table, not that I have for a long time, my hands reflexively go into a prayer without me even realizing it. Once I got a little older, around 16, I started to get sick of it. My friends would always post pictures of them at the beach on Sunday in bikinis that my mom would call an exorcist for if she ever saw me in. Through months of rolling eyes and dirty looks during Sunday service, my mom finally confronted me. "Are you questioning your faith?" she asked, coming into my room unannounced one night a few months back. "No, Mom, I still believe in him. I just don't know why I can't have faith and do things my friends do at the same time." I responded, still hiding my true feelings. "Honey, on the day of judgment we all must come to terms with our transgressions and make repent of our earthly sins. It is a fallen world, after all. Ever since the serpent tricked Eve in the garden, we have had to learn to coexist with our natural-born sin by," she began. I knew another sermon was coming. I needed an out. "You're right, Mom," I said, putting my hand on hers where she sat at the end of my bed. "I was just falling into temptation. I won't let it happen again, trust me," I said with my best fake smile I could muster. "I trust you, sweetheart. You know I was once young too, believe it or not," she said with a smile and a giggle before getting up to kiss me on the forehead and saying goodnight. For the next few weeks, I just tried to keep a low profile, do my best to put on a happy face around the creepy pastor, but I slowly felt my faith slipping away. Service after service, I became more and more detached and began to seriously question who exactly my parents consider as their faith. Do they really believe in God, or is it just a helpful excuse to control my life further? Last week, I had enough. On Sunday night, my friends texted me that they were going to a friend's house to smoke weed and hang out. Sundays are lockdown days. I am absolutely not allowed to see any of my friends all day, as it's reserved entirely for family and prayer. However, living in the basement grants some privileges, chief among which is my window. The screen door covers the window but can easily be popped out of place. So around 11 p.m., after my parents were fast asleep, I snuck out and bolted to my friend's car, waiting for me in the alley behind our house. "Hey, choir girl," Ashley said as I jumped in the back seat like I was fleeing the scene of bank robbery. "Drive, get me the fuck out of here," I said, tapping her shoulder relentlessly. Once we pulled up to Ashley's friend Megan's house, she stopped, put the car in park, and grabbed a baggie with a joint out of her backpack. "If I'm going to be in the room with Josh now that he and Megan are dating, I'm going to need this," she said, fiddling with her lighter, trying to get a spark before taking a puff and handing me the freshly lit joint. I have never smoked before, never even in the same room as someone who smoked cigarettes before. My immediate reaction was to say, "No, thank you," I said, waving my hand in the air. Ashley shrugged her shoulders. "Suit yourself," she said, taking another hit. We sat talking for a minute while she finished the joint. "Your parents still running a dictatorship?" Ashley asked after a brief moment of silence in the conversation. "Yeah, the older I get, the more they are convinced that whenever I'm out with friends, I'm worshiping the devil or having orgies with every guy in town," I responded, rolling my eyes. "I mean, not on Sundays, at least," Ashley said before immediately bursting out laughing at her own joke. I laughed with her, and once we both caught our breath, I stared at what little weed was left in her joint. "You know what? I'm dead if I get caught regardless," I said, holding my hand out to accept the joint. "Look at my choir girl go," Ashley responded. "You can finish it, my treat." I took one puff and immediately thought I swallowed an ember. My throat burned like a building on fire, and I coughed until my eyes watered and I was gasping for air like a drowning man. Ashley laughed and said, "It's okay, you won't have virgin lungs forever." After coughing my way through the rest of the joint, we went inside. What little I remember mostly consisted of me being slumped on the couch like a weighted blanket was draped over me, even though all I had was my hoodie and leggings on. When Ashley dropped me off a block from my house, I got out and tried to smell every part of me to make sure the weed smell had stayed in the car. As I turned the corner and saw the living room light on in my house, I felt the ground fall from beneath me. My heart raced so fast I thought it would never stop. I spent the next 10 minutes walking back and forth trying to think of what to do, until I decided that if I try to sneak back in through the window, maybe they won't notice. Walking to my backyard, I caught a glimpse of my living room, and my father was standing up in his pajamas, walking back and forth, talking on the phone. My mother was sitting on the couch with tears running down her cheeks, crouched over in prayer. At that moment, I knew I was in trouble. My mom was in tears, and my dad was rubbing his neck out of stress, not looking far from tears either. After sneaking back into my window, I lay in my bed waiting to either fall asleep or be yelled at by my parents. I ended up falling asleep. Nothing too unusual happened during my sleep. I didn't hear any strange noise or loud banging, but when I woke up, the stairs and door that led to the living room were gone. What was once my staircase and the only way out other than my window was just flat ground, covered in the same hardwood my floor was. Jumping out of bed, I ran to what now was solid ground, trying to make any sense of the situation. How do my stairs just disappear? How did this happen overnight? And how didn't I get woken up by it? An immediate sense of claustrophobia overtakes me. I feel the weight of a truck on my chest as I struggle for breath. I thought of my window, and before the thought fully registered in my mind, I had jumped on my bed and pulled on the window with every inch of my strength. It wouldn't budge, and with a horror I can't describe to this day, I noticed the window was welded shut. I immediately grab any item in reach and throw it at my window, eventually picking up my entire wooden nightstand and slamming it against the glass. It didn't even crack. I got at this for what may have been hours. Eventually, I collapsed out of exhaustion. The only thing I can do now is scream. "Mom, Dad, help me, I'm trapped!" I shout until my voice breaks and tears fill my eyes like a bucket key in a hurricane. They didn't respond. No one came for me. My phone doesn't have service or Wi-Fi. I have a TV and old classic DVDs my dad owns, but that's it. No food. Only water source is the sink in my bathroom. I spend the rest of the day pacing back and forth, intermittently screaming out for help until I notice a figure walking past my window. I jump up to the window and start banging on the glass like a caged chimpanzee. It's my mom. She's sitting on our backyard furniture, just staring into blank space. It looks like she has been crying for hours. Her eyes were blood red and tired. Her face was puffy and downtrodden. I bang even harder on the glass, screaming at her. "Mom, I'm here, please let me out!" She doesn't even move a muscle. What the fuck is happening? Is she ignoring me? Can she just not hear me? There's no way she can't hear me. I'm screaming as loud as I can, and the windows aren't that thick. Did they do this? Is that why she's crying? What kind of twisted parents would do this to their own daughter? I remember laying in bed with these questions racing through my mind over and over. Once night fell, I was still trapped. I laid in bed trying to sleep, hoping it was just a bad dream, or I would wake up and my stairs would be back and everything would be okay. They made their point. I won't ever sneak out or touch weed again. With unimaginable dread, the next morning I woke up and my stairs were still gone. I looked out my window again. Nothing. No one. Just the same patio furniture we have had since I was a toddler. I looked down and noticed all the clocks in my room and even on my phone had stopped. They all froze like a lake in the winter at 3:33 in the morning. The only way I could tell time now was through sundown and sunrise. I tried screaming again. I screamed and I screamed until my vocal cords were about to snap like old brake lines. I'll never forget the panic, like coming out of a car crash. I knew I absolutely had to do something, but I was fighting in a world I didn't even understand. The threat I faced didn't even have any direct attack. It stood ominously in front of me. I can't quite describe it, but just seeing that blank wall in the corner felt like a figure staring me down at the edge of my bed at every waking second. My panic quickly turned into a blind rage. Thoughts of the physical and emotional pain I would subject my parents for putting me here drove me as I picked up my battered nightstand and flung it at the space my door used to be. Over and over with each crash against the wall, the nightstand breaking into smaller and smaller pieces, but the wall stood, not even a chip in the paint. I push my dresser over to the torturous space of nothing and start slamming the now scattered wooden pieces directly into the wall with all the strength I could muster. Nothing. I slumped down and caught my breath. There I sat, alone, trapped in the place I once found comfort in, but now see as a twisted prison cell playing tricks on my psyche. For the rest of the day, I just laid in bed and watched some of the old DVDs I had on my shelf. The next day, I spent what I think was hours just looking out my window. It was fall now. When I became trapped, it was the middle of summer. How did it fast forward 2 months in a single night? My only perception of time was the daylight of my window. Had I really been in here that long? It seems every time I blink my eyes, I lose days. But is it really a loss? What kind of life am I living if I'm just a rat in a lab being experimented on by some demented god? From my perspective at the time of writing this, I have been down here for 25,430 sunsets, not counting the first few nights I wasn't keeping track. I'm not hungry, I'm not thirsty, and so much time has passed in my window that I don't even know the people in my backyard anymore. My parents died years ago, but yesterday for me. I can't ask for help. I know better now. I have shouted, cried, broken every piece of art and furniture in my room, and the only change has been a chip in the paint size of my fingernail. This isn't over me smoking weed. I don't even know if this is my parents doing. How could it have been? Ever since the night my stairs vanished, I haven't heard a single creak from upstairs. People walk past every day. What would they say if they learned the suburban home they just walked past has had a girl in the basement for over 60 years? For the first few nights, I remember praying, but I now realize I was praying to my tormentor. If there is a God, he's forgotten me. The basement was cold and damp, the air thick and stale. He stood there towering, his head nearly brushing the ceiling. His features were long and slender, limbs stretched unnaturally. His arms hung low, fingers almost grazing his knees. His legs, thin and bone-like, made him stand at an impossible 12 feet tall. His mouth stretched wide, too wide. An unnatural stretched mouth that revealed nothing but a black void inside. His eyes, deep and hollow, were pits of endless darkness, a void that seemed to pull everything in. I don't remember how it got there or how it even got inside. All I know is I locked it deep in my basement where it couldn't come out. Well, that was until I found the basement door wide open. "Hello," I said, staring into the dark basement that yawned open before me. My voice felt small, swallowed by the shadows below. Fear crawled up my throat, thick and sour like I might throw it up. I slammed the door shut, my hands shaking. Then I heard it, soft, rattling noises from the kitchen. Gentle, deliberate, like something was moving in there. Something was in the house with me. I moved deliberately, each step slow and careful, my breath caught in my throat. I watched my surroundings, making no noise as I crept toward the kitchen. And then I saw it. The creature from my basement stood at the sink, its towering frame hunched awkwardly beneath the ceiling. It stared out the window, motionless, its long, slender limbs hanging at its sides. It didn't move. It didn't make a sound. It just stood there, like it belonged. My heart slammed against my ribs as I bolted for the front door, feet barely touching the ground. I didn't dare look back. I didn't need to. The roar came first, splitting the air like a thunderclap. It wasn't human. It wasn't animal. It was deep, raw and wrong, vibrating through my bones, rattling my teeth. My legs nearly gave out from the sound alone, but fear shoved me forward. I hit the door hard, bursting into the cold night air. My car was just ahead, parked in the driveway. My keys. I needed my keys. My hand dove into my pocket, fingers trembling as I fumbled them out. Behind me, the door exploded open with a splintering crack. Heavy, unnatural footsteps pounded against the ground. Fast, too fast. I didn't have to see it to know it was coming. I could feel it closing the distance. I reached the car, yanked the door open, and threw myself inside. My hands shook so badly the keys slipped from my fingers and hit the floor mat. No, no, no. I grabbed them again, forcing the key into the ignition. The engine sputtered, coughed, the sound of death. The creature lunged from the doorway, its long, bony limbs propelling it forward in a blur of twisted movement. It was nearly to the car. The engine roared to life. I slammed the gear into reverse, tires squealing as I stomped the gas. The car jolted backward, throwing me against the seat as the creature lunged, just barely missing the hood. Its empty black eyes locked onto mine for a split second, burning into me before I peeled out of the driveway. I didn't stop. My foot stayed pressed to the floor, the car flying down the long, dark street. The night swallowed everything around me, but I didn't care where I was going, as long as it wasn't back there. Days passed. I barely slept, holed up in a cheap hotel on the edge of town. The room smelled like old cigarettes and stale air, but it didn't matter. It had 4 walls and a locked door. Every night I checked the window, just to be sure. That night was no different. I pulled back the curtain, heart already racing before I even looked. The parking lot below was empty, streetlights flickering weakly against the dark. For a second, I let myself believe I was safe. Then I saw it. Beyond the lot, past the stretch of cracked asphalt and the rusted chain-link fence, the woods began, thick, black trees rising like jagged teeth. And there, just at the edge where the trees met the night, it stood. The tall, twisted figure. It didn't move. It didn't blink. It only stared, watching me from the shadows. It found me. In an instant, I yanked the curtains shut, heart slamming against my ribs. My breath came in quick, shaky bursts. I sprinted to the door, peering through the peephole. Nothing. The hallway outside was empty, still and quiet. I didn't know how fast it was. I didn't know how smart it was. But it found me. Hours crawled by. The TV droned on in the background, some late-night sitcom I wasn't paying attention to. I kept glancing at the window, half expecting to see it again. Then came the knock. It wasn't loud, just a soft, deliberate tapping. My head snapped toward the door, dread sinking like a cold weight in my chest. Who the hell could that be? I slid off the bed, feet hitting the floor. Before I reached the door, I heard it. A voice. Hello. I need help. Help me. Help me. I need help. Help me. It didn't sound right. It was flat, robotic, like a bad recording played over and over. No emotion, no urgency. I froze, my throat tightened. If you don't leave right now, I'm calling the police, I shouted, voice trembling. The voice didn't stop. Help me. I need help. Open the door. Open the door. Open the door. It wasn't even yelling, just that same lifeless, droning tone. That was the worst part. The calmness, like it wasn't asking, like it was telling. My hands fumbled for my phone. I dialed 911, fingers shaking so hard I almost hit the wrong numbers. The voice stopped. My stomach twisted. It was like it knew. The operator answered. I explained everything. The voice, the knocking, the thing in the woods. My words tumbled out fast, frantic. We'll send someone, they said, but it might take a few hours. A few hours. My heart sank. My hand shook so badly the phone nearly slipped from my ear. I didn't hang up. I didn't move. I just stared at the door, waiting. Out of fear, I asked, Could you just stay on the line until they come? I don't want to be alone. At first, she hesitated. I'm sorry, sir. We can't do that. We have to answer other calls. Please, I cut in, my voice trembling. Please, I don't think I'll make it if I'm alone. There was a pause. I could hear her breathing on the other end. Then, quietly, she said, "Okay, I'll stay." Relief washed over me, but it didn't chase the fear away. My eyes stayed locked on the door. Her voice was calm, gentle. "My name's Rachel. What's your name?" I swallowed hard. It's James." "All right, James, I'm here with you. You're not alone." My throat tightened. "Thank you. I think it's still out there." "Can you still hear the voice?" she asked softly. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. "Number? It stopped when I called you, but the way it sounded..." I paused, shuddering at the memory. It wasn't normal. It was like robotic, repeating itself over and over. Rachel was quiet for a moment, then said, "You're doing great, James. Just stay with me. The officers are on their way." I nodded again, trying to steady my breathing. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that the quiet wasn't a good thing. It felt like the calm before something worse. Rachel's voice came through the phone again, steady but a little more serious. "James, who's chasing you? Can you describe them?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My throat felt tight, like the words got stuck halfway up. I don't know," I said finally. It wasn't a lie. Not really. "It's tall. Really tall. Its arms are too long. Its mouth..." My voice trailed off. My mind replayed that black void, the hollow eyes. My stomach twisted. "Too long?" Rachel asked gently. "James, are you saying it's someone wearing a mask, or..." "No," I cut in, my voice cracking. "It's not a mask. It's not human." The line went quiet for a moment. I heard her breathe in. "James," she said slowly, carefully. "Are you sure? Could it be someone in a costume, maybe? Sometimes when we're scared, our minds..." "I know what I saw," I snapped, louder than I meant to. My voice echoed off the hotel walls, and I flinched at how desperate I sounded. Rachel didn't react. She stayed calm. "Okay, I believe you. You're doing great, James. Just stay with me, all right? The officers are still on their way." My chest felt tight, like I couldn't get a full breath. My eyes stayed locked on the door. I couldn't tell her the truth, not all of it. If I said a monster crawled out of my basement and followed me to a hotel, they'd think I lost my mind. Maybe I had. But the thing outside, the voice, it wasn't in my head. It was real, and it wasn't gone. An hour passed in what felt like seconds. The room was still, but I couldn't escape the feeling that something was wrong. My pulse thudded in my ears, every breath a battle against the rising panic. Rachel's voice kept me tethered to reality, her calm words a thread I clung to. Then, suddenly, a knock at the door. "Knock, knock." I froze. The hairs on my neck stood up. "Hello, this is the police. Open the door. This is the police. Open the door." A wave of relief flooded through me. I wasn't alone. Finally, the officers were here. I rushed to the door, heart pounding in my chest. I glanced at my phone to make sure I hadn't missed anything, and there it was. The call still connected, Rachel's voice as steady as ever. "James, stay calm. They're on their way." I could hear the muffled voice of the officer outside, repeating the same line. The door was within reach. I grabbed the handle, yanked it open, ready to let in the safety of the police. But there it stood, the creature. It towered, its limbs unnaturally long, bent in sickening angles, its black, empty eyes locked onto mine. The grin that stretched across its face was wide and chilling, too wide. I looked down at my phone in my trembling hands. The screen read, 911. What's your emergency? A smile twisted across the creature's face. It wasn't the officer. It never was. I staggered back, my blood running cold. My stomach dropped into a pit of icy dread, and then it hit me. Rachel never asked for my location. I had never been on the phone with the police. I had been talking to it. God help me. Until very recently, I was a project manager for the Department of External Intelligence, a government organization tasked with probing the boundaries of human consciousness and unraveling mysteries beyond the paranormal. The things I have witnessed far exceed our expectations of the universe and shouldn't remain hidden, even if the truth is horrific. If you are reading this, I am so sorry for what is to come. When I was younger, my parents pushed me hard for good grades. Giving me the life they never had seemed to be their only duty, even if it meant that my childhood suffered. And I gave them what they wanted: the best marks in school, the hope of a successful career, and lots of money. Unfortunately, nobody, not even my cruel father, could have predicted that I would end up working for a secret branch of the government, one whose sole duty is uncovering facts that the mortal mind can barely comprehend. I started as a data analyst, but the executives soon realized that my skills could be better used elsewhere. It took just a few tests for me to be introduced to the psychical experiment sector, aimed at identifying uses for psychic phenomena. I was deemed to have special abilities and was told I could tap into a realm that few humans could. For a while, I was an agent for remote viewing. Essentially, my mind was used to spy on foreign nations. With some meditative steps, I was able to visualize complex environments and assist our army in pinpointing the locations of enemy bases. Was this ethical? I don't know, but it provided me with a sense of accomplishment, so I continued to do it. The more important I became in my job, the more I had to hide from my family and friends. My parents died thinking I was a pencil pusher for the government, and the few relationships I've had have remained short due to my secret life. The longer I've stayed with the department, the more information I have been given. But it was only once I became appointed as a project manager that I learned details that, if leaked, would change the world forever. I'm sure you have noticed the increased sightings of UFOs, or UAPs, in recent years. Their frequency has been at the center of my new position in the department. You see, these aren't vehicles piloted by little green men, they are beings themselves. Classified internally as seraphs, these entities have been visiting us for centuries. The Bible called them angels. The Quran named them malaika. But they are the same things that have been seen in the sky of every continent on Earth. I was told that they didn't know where they came from, or why they had visited us. Sadly, for them, I have a unique intuition, and knew that was a lie. I had spent many hours in the office after hours, dissecting classified documents and logging into computers above my access level. The more vivid the details became, the more I questioned my actions. What if I uncovered something I didn't want to? You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, a silly metaphor for a twisted reality I was soon to live. It took me many months, but I eventually pieced together why the 33rd floor of our building is off limits. The Department of External Intelligence has been communicating with the Seraphs and has a machine built for this sole purpose. Last week, I used the device. It was a day like any other, at least that was the role I played. I scanned my card to enter the building and made my way to my office on the 24th floor. I put on a happy face as I greeted my companions in the rustic elevator, patiently waiting for the neon green screen to tick higher while soft synth sounds filled the cramped space. Finally reaching my secretary, I cleared my schedule and began to set the plan into motion. I couldn't take the elevator to my destination. The buttons skipped straight from 32 to 34. However, I did learn that a maintenance ladder runs up the building's spine. Applying some remote viewing techniques, I discovered an access hatch on floor 28 behind some servers. This was all I could gain as the department recently installed consciousness dampeners, blurring my external vision. Getting to the server room was easy, and it took but a small distraction to enter the hatch as I began climbing the maintenance ladder. I was on the 28th floor, but looking down it seemed as though the shaft stretched into an infinite abyss with no end in sight. The department was unlike any other building, with winding corridors and frequent cases of spectral appearances. A ladder stretching to an impossible darkness seemed on brand. Entering the 33rd floor took some time, but with some minor effort, I was in the sector that only executives had access to. Standing in what appeared to be a reception area, the silence of my new environment startled me. I expected a welcoming party, but was met with nobody at all. The department's building was informally named the Monolith due to its brutalist design and tall concrete walls. The 33rd floor was no different, with a ceiling that stretched higher than one would have expected the facility to accommodate. The area I was in was adorned in a familiar old-school look featuring Persian carpets, homely lamps, and box computers. We were told that vintage technology offered better protection against hackers. I stood facing a door labeled Testing and Research. It seemed like the sign I needed, so I swiftly made my way through. Presented with a long corridor, I knew that my goal stood at the end. Walking past the many doors to my left and right, I saw what appeared to be ancient symbols. The sounds I heard from each of them were almost indescribable. Some seemed like soft moans, while others appeared to be painful screams. I have no idea what was being done in these rooms. The double wooden doors at the end of the corridor clashed with the concrete surrounding it, but I suppose this was another example of the department's unique style. Before I swung the doors open, I noticed the digital camera in the corner. I had surely been caught, so there was no time to waste. To say I was shocked by what I saw would be an understatement. I had expected a massive machine with tubes and towering screens. Instead, the room contained only a leather couch facing a bulky CRT TV perched on a wooden stand. There was nothing else. No furniture, no monitoring equipment, just an outdated entertainment setup in a cold concrete space. I edged closer and saw a remote resting on the couch. Surprisingly, there were no numbers, and the only button was a round red one for power. I had come this far, so I did the only thing that made sense. I sat on the couch, pressing the button. Bursting alive, the ocean of static flooded my mind, and it became clear that this was the machine I was after. It's hard to describe, but I felt as though I entered a state where time had no meaning. That's when I realized I wasn't alone. A seraph was there with me. I could sense them. It didn't speak words, yet I understood what was being communicated. Closer to a feeling, information appeared in my mind as though I manifested it, but I knew it was foreign. It was as though the seraph spent a few moments within my skin. At first, I asked my pre-planned questions. I wanted to know where it came from and why it was visiting Earth. I quickly learned that languages developed by humans are a prime illustration of our insignificance in the universe. This is the best way I can put it. If you think about a house, with every room being a planet, we can move from one room to another, a crude metaphor for space travel. If we are sitting in the living room, the seraphs have always been here, in a place that occupies the same space but in reverse, mirrored dimensions, two areas next to each other, but because they are back to back, one doesn't notice the other. The seraph told me that the reason that so many of them have decided to visit us is that they are partaking in a great harvest. They have made their way through many universes, and now it was our turn. Human souls hold special meaning in their existence, and it is only through our death that they can be harvested. Through it all, I had no fear. The seraph comforted me and guided me along each stage of the conversation. It whispered wise truths and made me feel as though my normal life had been but a dream compared to true reality. With my mind barely comprehending the secrets I had learnt, the TV zapped off, leaving a brief imprint of static as it slowly turned pitch black. I had been told too much, perhaps more than I wanted, and so I ran to the door. By the time I had reached the floor's hatch, 2 department officials were already there to arrest me. Their voices appeared calm, yet their grip on the concussion devices remained firm. They had a clear intent to take me down with whatever force was necessary. What happened next, I don't remember. It seems as though a few minutes were wiped from my memory. I recall putting my hands behind my head in surrender. When I came to, my hands gripped the jagged edge of a broken lamp, with corpses slumped at my feet. 2 dead bodies lay before me, mangled into a portrait of ripped flesh. I had to escape. I would surely be locked up for something I don't remember doing. Diving into the maintenance hatch, I flew down the ladder as quickly as I could, racing out of the building while trying to hide the blood on my clothes. I believe some people saw the stains, but they could have just as easily been staring at a madman running through a government facility. I am writing this message on a library computer. I dare not go home, as I will surely be found there. On the run for 7 days now, I don't know what is going to happen, but the world deserves to know the truth. Great pain and mass deaths are coming. I know this because the Seraph has continued to talk to me, giving me instructions for the coming months. I refused to die, and so I made a deal. I will help them. I will be a harvester in human form. In return, they will ensure that my soul remains eternal. My whole life I have been controlled by my father, by the department. But this pact was mine to make. For the first time in my life, I felt powerful. If you are reading this, I am so sorry for what is to come. Hold your loved ones tight and enjoy the time you have left. We will find you. You cannot hide forever. Right as I had finally memorized and grown accustomed to the noises each step my mother and father make in our home. The night sky had decided to come forth, and the scorching sun took its ray of light and heat to slumber, and so did we. I go in my room and turn the lights off. As I was coming closer to my bed, the sound of me, my mother and father's footsteps could be heard echoing across the house. We all had gone to sleep. It was 3 a.m. That is the time when I woke up to a strange, loud noise, followed by the sound of footsteps. Petrified and half awake, I stayed in bed, hiding under the sheets, ears open to hear any sound that was coming from downstairs. That is, when I realized those were not the footsteps of anyone I know. Realization hit me, followed by fear, and a chilling feeling that gave me the shivers. I could hear him, or her. You can't really tell who or what it was. All you could hear was its footsteps, and that it isn't Mom nor Dad. Knock, knock. My eyes open wide. I am now wide awake, taking a peek from under my sheet. The sound of knocking is at my door, but who could it be? Even though the room was dark, it was almost as if you could even see the door trembling with each knock. Knock, knock. That thing behind the door kept knocking. Me, as I am wide awake now, cowering in fear under my sheets, couldn't even move to answer the door. And to be honest, even if I could, I don't think I'd have the courage to. I could feel my heart sinking, my lungs breathing heavily as fear began seeping into me. Knock, knock. The thing was persistent. Then I look at the time. It was an old clock that has always been in my room ever since we moved in. 3:05 a.m. I look in shock. Only 5 minutes have passed. How can this be? Knock, knock. Driven by shock and frustration, I decide to accept my fate. The paralyzing fear had calmed down, still shivering from the unknown that was waiting for me behind that door. Knock, knock. I hop out of bed, wearing my pajamas. Yes, those pajamas my mom and dad bought me a couple of weeks ago. I was wondering if this is the end for me. Will I ever wear those pajamas again? My hand, cold as ice due to loss of blood circulation in my hand, reaching out for the door handle. The cold breeze in the room from the open window I forgot to close before I went to sleep. My eyes drifting everywhere, wondering what to do. I opened the door, and there it was. A dark, humanoid figure. I was rather young, so at the time I thought it was my dad, since it looked like a man, in his 30s. Foolish little me felt a sense of relief, and at the same time, curiosity. Why could I not tell it was my dad? Why is he just standing there, in the darkness? Many questions, many possible answers. But one thing was clear. That thing was not my father. Little me, so young and foolish, jumps at it, joyfully yelling out, "Dad, Dad, you scared me." Alas, the thing did not respond. Instead, all I could feel was its cold body. It almost didn't even feel like a body, as it was not human, more like a manifestation, a pretender. There was no heartbeat, no breathing. Actually, it did breathe, but its lungs didn't move. It was as if looking at a deaf person who could breathe and move. Young me at that time had realized that was no human. or at least not one that I was familiar with at my young age. And now that I'm older, I'm sure you and me both realize that there really are no humans like that. Shocked from what I had just witnessed, I rushed to my parents' rooms as I noticed that thing was just standing there, focused on my room. Yet to my surprise, as I reached the stairs, my heart sinks to the floor and my breathing intensifies when I saw it. That thing hiding in the darkness, in the blink of an eye, turned its face towards me. Now that it was facing my direction, you could clearly see the look on its face. It had eyes, but couldn't see, or so I assume, since they were pitch black. It didn't have ears, or at least I didn't see any due to its long black hair. It was no usual hair. It looked almost like clay. It didn't have the physics of normal hair, almost as if looking at a mangled mannequin. I sprint to my parents' room. I hear the thing let out a deafening roar, sending chill down my spine. Tears begin rolling down my cheeks, but I don't stop. I can't stop. Stop running and who knows what will happen. I could hear it, its footsteps as I ran, this time, however much faster. Little me, with his tiny legs, tried the best he could to outrun it. What used to be unknown just minutes ago was now charging at me in efforts to catch me. Heavy breathing was traversing the air, screams were echoing, growling noises were heard, loud footsteps, tear marks on the ground. One little boy and an unknown trespasser who, for unknown reasons and unknown goals, wanted to catch him. There it was, the door. I could feel the sense of hope, and the numerous times I thought to myself, I can do it! I'm almost there! Mom! Dad! I'm almost there! Looking back, the thing was right behind me, glaring at me, growling and reaching out for me. With my last strength I had left, I immediately reached out for the handle, opened the door, and closed myself inside. There I was, lying down, on the ground. I could hear that thing again, knocking. I was so tired and so relieved that I outran it that I had forgotten my sole reason for even coming to this room in the first place. As I was lying down, catching my breath, I noticed a musty smell in the room. Something was wrong. My parents' room has never smelled so unpleasantly before. I stood up, brushed all the dust off my so precious pajamas. Although those were the least of my concerns at the moment, because right in front of me were two bodies, deformed to such unrecognizable forms that one would mistake it for a different animal. Unfortunately for me, it was clear that those two were my parents. Knock, knock. The knocking sound was back, this time more aggressive than before. I panicked. What do I do? It's right there. Mom. Dad. Knock, knock. I start quietly sobbing and decide that if my time has arrived, then so be it. Using my last efforts, I put my cold, shaky hand on my mouth in attempts to be quieter. Close my eyes and lie on the ground with my two parents' bodies on top of me. And then it happened. The knocking intensified, faster and louder than before, till it eventually barged in through the door. My vision was blocked. All I had was my hearing. My nose was clogged with the grim smell the bodies were letting out. Slow footsteps were approaching. All that was going through my mind was, please don't find me. Please don't find me. The thing, almost as if reading my mind, went out of the room. Next to my parents' bedroom was my dad's office. He always told me to never go in there, for unknown reasons. However, my parents' bedroom was the worst place to hide in at the moment, as it was the last location it saw me in. I crawled towards the office, holding my breath, tears and cries in. You could hear it looking for me upstairs. I gently grabbed the door, which was excruciatingly hard, as I couldn't stop myself shaking in fear. The door opens. Cold breeze hits me in the face, coming from inside the room. You can hear the sound of papers being blown from the wind. I go inside and use my little strength to push some old small couch to the door, in hopes to somehow block it from entering. Although we all know that would never work with a small couch like that. On my dad's desk, you could see his laptop, papers, the pen he was always writing with whenever I used to come here to tell him that Mom's calling us for dinner. I miss my parents so much. I say, I have to make it out of here. I was very young. You, would probably suggest to use the laptop to call for help, but we can't just assume I know the password. At the far right corner, I glimpsed a landline phone, the ones that nowadays would be called ancient. I probably got the emergency number wrong a couple of times due to panicking and being unable to keep my thoughts straight. Eventually, I dialed 911 and help was coming. The person on the other end of the line seemed very level-headed and managed to calm me down a bit as I was hiding under my dad's desk. A couple of minutes later, loud noises echo through the walls, and for some time after that, quietness had took over the house. A moment after that, I could hear the sirens of the ambulances and the police cars coming to my home, and I decided to go out of the room and meet them at the entrance. The thing was nowhere to be found. All that was left of the scene were my parents, both gone. Me, shivering in fear, and a couple of broken furnitures. I don't know what it was, who it was, where it is, or what it wanted. All I know was that it meant no good. And even though I saw its appearance, you could say it's still unknown, as it was so unusual that you can't even describe it unless you see it for yourself. A couple of years later, I'm at my office, writing this to you, since the only actual characters in this story are me, my parents, and you. That thing is still not found. It's lurking, possibly knocking at someone else's door right now, walking around inside someone else's home. Whatever it is, whatever it wants, do not answer the door. Don't let it know that you're in there. Don't let her fool you. I tilted my head as I read my mother's strange text. There was no context in a previous conversation or build-up to warrant the strange, cryptic message. I hadn't texted my mother in a few hours, and even then, it was to remind her to pick up dog food on her way home from church that night. "Who are we talking about?" I replied and waited. Nothing. My dog Lucy suddenly lifted her head before letting out a series of loud barks as she ran towards the front door. The unexpected loud noise caused me to jump in my seat. My dog stared at the door and barked intensely. The door's window looked obscured by the darkness of the night outside, like an inky veil hiding whatever was making my dog nervous just behind it. I slid off my gaming headphones and began approaching the door. As I stepped down the hallway towards the door, I felt a strange unease as I looked at the doorknob, unlocked. We always lock our doors once the sun sets, but with my parents gone and myself distracted by my game, the thought of doing so had escaped my mind. As I reached the door, I quickly moved my hand and locked it before flipping on the porch light. The curtain of darkness was pulled back to reveal an empty porch. I scanned what little of the yard I could see through the window, looking for any sign of movement in the darkness, but there was none. I shooshed my dog, assuming she was alerting over a bad dream or a reflection she saw in the window. She stopped barking, but remained alert, staring at the door with perked ears. I went around the house, locking the other two entrances before sitting back down on the couch. I took out my phone and looked down at my mother's message again. "Don't let her fool you." I clicked the call button. At this point, I was wondering if she had meant to send the message to someone else. If she hadn't, though, I wanted to know who the message was talking about and how they were trying to fool me. The phone rang a few times before going to voicemail. Lucy came over and sat down next to me, looking around the room with great unease. "What's gotten into you?" I said as I reached down and patted her head. Without warning, Lucy lurched to her feet and began barking intensely at the back door now. Startled, I tried calming her, but she refused to be pulled away or settled. "There is nothing out there," I said, as I ran my hand over the hackles across her back, her barking refusing to stop. I stepped to the door and pulled the string that opened the faux blinds that obscured the window. See, no one is there. I flipped on the light to the back porch to get a better view. As the light illuminated the porch, that was when I saw it on the door, something that was unnoticeable without the light from outside. A small round patch of fresh condensation on the outside of the window. I looked closer, not understanding at first what I was looking at or the implication it brought. I stepped back as the realization hit me like a ton of bricks. Something was just standing right outside my door. I jumped as I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. Taking it out, I could see a new text from my mother. "I need your help. I'll be home soon." I quickly began typing out a reply. Mom, something weird is going on here. I think someone is walking around the house. After sending the message, I remembered the cameras my parents had installed on the four corners of the house. I figured if someone was sneaking around and looking for a way to break in, they would show up on the camera. The app buffered for a few seconds before opening to the live camera view. I sat surprised as I looked at the screen. 3 of the 4 cameras were offline. Confused, I opened the motion recording section of the app. Think perhaps the cameras caught something before going offline. Nothing. There wasn't a single recording on the app. It was as though all the footage had been deleted and the recording feature turned off. An even more eerie feeling began to creep over me. I gasped as I backed out to the live camera page. The last camera was now offline. I opened the phone app and hovered my thumb over the keypad, about to dial 911. It could be nothing. Just a dog acting strange, a random server issue with the cameras, and weird airflow causing the wet spot on the window. But I wasn't willing to take that kind of chance. If there was someone out there, then I needed someone here. I had just finished typing in the 3 numbers when a sharp series of knocks rang out from my front door. My heart sank and I flinched as Lucy ran back to the front door, letting out a new flurry of her aggressive barks. I stepped into the hallway and stared at the door. I could see the faint silhouette of a person standing on the porch, but any details were swallowed up by the darkness of the night. As I stared at the figure, I heard a voice coming through the door. "Sweetheart, it's me. Come open the door." The voice sounded familiar, but completely new at the same time. "Who's there?" I called out, taking a few steps down the hallway. "It's your mom, silly. I forgot my keys when I left for the store. I need you to open the door so I can get started on dinner." A cold chill ran down my spine. My mother has a unique voice. Whoever was standing on the other side of the door was trying to replicate it. Certain parts of the cadence were spot on, but little things just felt wrong. "My mother is at church," I called out. "I don't know who you are, but you need to leave now before I call the police." A thick silence filled the air as I waited for a response. "I picked up some cosmic brownies at the store. I know they are your favorite. Please come open the door for me." I don't know what disturbed me more in that moment, the way she ignored my threat and kept up the charade, or the fact that she knew my favorite snack. "I'm calling the police. You need to get..." Thud. The woman stepped up to the door and slammed her fist against it. I could see her better now. The light from inside the house shone through the window and illuminated her rage-filled eyes. Lucy barked more aggressively at the better view of the woman. Lucy was always standoffish to strangers, but the way that was acting was way more aggressive than I had ever seen her before. "You will open this door this instant!" she yelled, still trying to imitate my mother's voice. "I am your mother, and you will do as you're told." As I looked at the woman, a new sense of dread passed over me. The woman was not my mother, but she looked like her. She wore the same hairstyle, her head shape and nose looked the same. She was even wearing an outfit I could have sworn I had seen my own mother wear before. But she wasn't my mother. There were small details. Different ears, eyes slightly too far apart. The woman looked as though her and my mom could do the doppelganger trend together. At a passing glance, you might mistake the two, but I knew my mother. This wasn't her. I hit the call button on my phone and placed it to my ear as I stepped back further from the door, the quiet ringing sound music to my ears. "I'm calling the police now!" I yelled. "Get out of here!" Thud. Thud. The woman's fist slammed against the window of the door. "Open the damn door!" she screamed, no longer hiding behind the imitation. "You will listen to your mother, or I'll give you a reason to be afraid." The 911 operator picked up and asked me what the emergency was, her calm, questioning voice feeling inappropriate given the fear I was feeling in that moment. I quickly recited my address as the woman at the door began pounding on the door harder, screaming vile obscenities between calm moments where she would plead for me to open the door in a now shattered impression of the woman that raised me. "Please hurry," I pleaded. "She is really trying to get in now." Crack. My heart sank as I saw a small crack form around the woman's hand as it slammed against the door. Without leaving another second to pass, I turned and ran. This woman was getting in the house, and I needed to find a place to hide before it was too late. I ran to the kitchen. My head spun as I considered my options, my brain distracted by the woman's screaming and pounding mixed with Lucy's incessant barking. I grabbed a kitchen knife and ran to my parents' bedroom, turning off the lights as I ran to hide my movements. I went into their walk-in closet and tucked myself into the back corner, covered behind layers of my father's coats and shirts. My whole body jumped as I heard the window shatter, followed by a pained scream from the woman. "Look what you made me do!" she screamed before her voice suddenly calmed to a sickening sweet tone. "This cut is really bad, sweetheart. Can you bring me a Band-Aid?" "She's in the house," I whispered into the phone. The 911 operator instructed me to stay silent and in place while help was on the way. I could hear Lucy running around the house, barking wildly. She wasn't a small dog, but she wasn't the type to actually get violent if push came to shove. I could hear the woman walking around the house calling out for me in my mother's voice. "Sweetheart, this is all a misunderstanding. Come out and see me. Let me hold you." From the sound of it, she was looking around the kitchen and living room. "Lucy is acting really strange," she called out. "Maybe that diet we put her on has her acting weird. Come take a look at her for me." We had put Lucy on a special diet a few weeks before. We hadn't told anyone, but she knew. "You always did like playing hide-and-seek when you were little," she said as I heard her step into my parents' room. "Even when no one else was playing. Just come out and see me." I didn't speak. I didn't cry. I didn't breathe. I muted my phone so the operator's voice wouldn't be heard. I kept silent in crippling fear for my life. Every second an eternity. Every sound of an approaching footfall met with a further deepening pit in my stomach. "You were always so disobedient." She spoke softly, her voice stifling anger. "You were always my least favorite, but I still love you." I heard the clicking sound of the closet door as she turned the doorknob. "You should appreciate our family the way I do." I heard the door swing open. I could see flickers of light from the bedroom dance between the drapes that covered me. I knew any moment the horrid impersonator would pull back the clothes and kill me. I gripped the knife tighter. I have never been a fighter. I knew between my fear and lack of experience I didn't stand a chance. I would fight, but I knew I would fail. Her hauntingly soft voice filled the closet. "We'll have such lovely family time to get..." Her voice was cut off by the sounds of police sirens pulling down our road. She waited a moment and then sighed deeply. "So bad," she whispered before I heard her footsteps quickly retreating out of the room. I began to hyperventilate as I heard the police call out as they made their way into the house. I couldn't believe the ordeal was over. I walked in shock as the police led me through the house that was covered in the blood trail. Lucy followed us around, refusing to leave my side. I sent up a small prayer thanking God that the lady didn't do anything to Lucy besides scare her. The police took me outside and questioned me on the events while other police scoured the area trying to find the woman. They never did. When my parents arrived home, I clung to them and cried in my mother's arms. Through my labored cries, I asked the only question I could think to ask at that moment. Who was she? How did you know? My mother looked at me confused. How did I know what, sweetheart? The woman. You sent those text messages. My mother's face went pale. I haven't had my phone all night. I forgot it when I went to church. It was in the house somewhere. I looked down at my phone while trying to grasp the terrifying facts of the situation. The woman had been in the house at some point without me even knowing it. Suddenly my phone vibrated in my hand. A Facebook notification. My mother had tagged me in something. I opened the notification from my phone to take me to a small, simple post only a few seconds old. It was 2 pictures. The first was a family photo we had taken a few years ago when we went on vacation to Disney World. The second photo was a photo of me, standing at the front door, looking out the window. Above the photos was a small line of text that simply read, "I love my family. Most families in America can trace their roots back all the way to colonial times, when brave men and women made the pilgrimage, ready to plunder the virgin world awaiting them. My family held deeper roots than most. We can trace our lineage all the way back to the old country and beyond. The Mariani family were spread across the boot, like lice on a mangy mutt. We came from all manner of background and class, to the luxury living gods in the north, to the bitter peasant Marianis to the south. Our ancestors would bicker and clash over every little thing. Century-old grudges still persist to this day. But the one thing to unite our clan, truly unite it, was when an outsider offended us. The Mariani temper became legend, and legend turned to unspoken horror as we grew bold in our retribution. There is all manner of tales I could spin. In the 1800s, for example, Nico Mariani was tending to his vineyard when the town drunk came upon him. He was sullied and vulgar, smelling like week-old manure dipped in vinegar. So the story goes, Nico was appalled at just the sight of the oof and demanded he get away from his vineyard. The drunk laughed in his face, pushed him aside, and pulled out his syphilis-infused prick and began relieving himself all over Nico's prized grapes. The infuriated Nico lunged at the man, coming down on him with blows and curses upon his whole bloodline. The drunk ran away laughing, urine still pouring down his leg. Nico tidied himself up and simply went back to his home. He wrote a letter to the current patriarch of the clan telling him of his grievance, and wrote down the drunkard's name at the bottom of the letter. With a sly smile, he sent that letter off, and within a week the drunkard was found. He was entangled in the bushes, thorny roses slitting his dry skin, his eyes bloodshot and full of fear. He reeked of death and piss, and according to legend, his cock was found stuffed halfway down his throat. Thus became the fate of any a man who befouled our family. As word spread, others would keep their distance. Some members of our clan would even be chased out of their villages. Those same towns soon met with unusual fates, storms sweeping through in the night, plague coming down and wiping them all out. Those of the Mariani clan would claim that God was on their side. We were simply the chosen family of the nation. These boastful morons were just that. They all knew the truth to their petty revenge. To my knowledge, no one knows for sure how it started. Maybe it was one drunken brawl too many, and measures had to be taken to ensure it would always go in our favor. All I knew is the ledger was held by one member of the clan, the patriarch, and passed down eventually. I had glimpsed it only once. It is a brown, leather-bound tome that reeks of age. It's rather unassuming. One might mistake it for a tattered old journal instead of collection of victims. My father, Vincent, was the current keeper of the ledger. He kept it in a locked box under his bed. We didn't talk about it. Every once in a while he would get a call from some long-forgotten cousin or distant uncle, and a somber look came upon his face. As their petty grievances drone on and on, sometimes he would just sharply cut them off, demanding a name. Then he trudged off to his room and locked it behind him. We didn't see him for the rest of the day. I only know of one time my father wrote a name in for himself. When I was a boy, my mother was killed by a drunk driver. She was jogging in the late afternoon, and a plastered trucker swayed too far to the left and pinned her to a tree. My mother lay splattered on the hood of the gnarled truck as the driver, a man named Arnold, limped away begging for help. He was arrested, of course, but evidently there was some mistake the police made. Something about the chain of custody being tainted, and the case was thrown out. Imagine that, murdering a woman and not even batting an eye after the fact. He never once looked ashamed of his actions. He looked more annoyed than anything, like my mother had just gotten in his merry way. My father was beside himself with grief, of course. I could hear him wailing long into the night as he hid himself away. The various cousins had flocked to our house like gulls, offering sorrow in one hand and a hefty plate of pasta in the other. I didn't think they were callous. It was just their way. My Uncle Tony had clamped a gorilla hand on me and pulled me in, muttering it was going all be okay. His breath had a lingering smell of sambuca and cigar smoke. We were sitting in the living room, our clan chattering amongst themselves, leaving my father to his torment alone. They grieved for her, my mother, I know they did. Yet they treated her wake as one big family reunion. In the corner, I heard some of my Tanner cousins slurring at each other in the tongue of the motherland. In the kitchen, I heard the crazed yet harmonic voice of my Uncle Corrado in the kitchen, serenading his wide-eyed nieces and nephews. Uncle Tony could see the miserable look upon my face and gave me a loving smack in the head. "Hey, don't look so miserable, my boy. Your mother is gone, but the family? It'll always be here for you," he said through puckered lips. "Don't you worry either. That son of a bitch is gonna get his." He warned, a tiger's grin forming on his face. "You mean the—" Uncle Tony cut me off with a finger to his lips and a firm grasp on my back. "We don't talk about it here, Bad Karma. It'll be taken care of. That's all you need to know. Let me ask you something, though. How does it work?" I whispered to him, leaning into the man despite wafts of drink and bad cologne emitting from him. "Suppose you'd have to ask your pop about that," he said after a moment. He took a sip from his drink, a long one. "Have my theories, of course. We all do," he admitted quietly. I perked up at this. To be honest, I always just assumed someone within the family took care of things, I admitted uneasily. This got a hearty laugh out of Tony. "Christ, kid, you think we're a—" He tapped his nose. "No, come on, we're a lot of things, but we're an honest bunch. We ain't connected like that," he stated plainly. "The thing with the book, I don't know how it works other than magic, kid. Gotta be. Keeper of the ledger has gotta be a warlock or something like that, using the old Italian black magic on people." Tony slurred. A crazy explanation, and one I would hear at least twice more that night. After I left Tony's charming embrace, I went around and casually asked about the ledger to others. Some laughed it off, others hushed up real quick. Few cousins even thought we were connected after all, said the ledger was a hit list for those who owed certain people too much money. Others said the ledger was a myth, a family fable to make us feel better during hard times. That didn't account for the deadly results of the myth, of course, but they dismissed it as bad luck. In face, that's what some others said as well, that we were blessed and others purely unlucky. I heard it all. Blood magic, a pact with a demon. Ask any member of my family and you would get tangled in a web of conspiracy. The only common answer was, "Your father would know better." That night I decided I would ask him about that solemn task. The rest of the evening was spent with the comfort of relatives and array of pasta and meat. The fridge looked like it had been fully staffed by an olive garden, and the aroma of herbs and garlic clung to the air in desperation. Soon enough I was alone in the house, save my father who was still holed up in his room. It was a deadly sort of quiet in that house, the kind where you can't bear to be along with your thoughts. I tiptoed up the winding stairs towards my father's room. Stopping at the top, I called out to him. The silence slapped me in the face. My father's door was shut tight, yet I could see light creeping out from the bottom. I approached the oak wood door with a sudden caution, worried that my father had decided to join my mother wherever she rested. I crept towards the door like an unwanted intruder, and to my surprise it creaked open ever so slightly. Light slashed my face, and I winced at the sudden flash of white lightning. I peeked inside and stood frozen at the impossible sight before me. My father sat on his bed, clutching his silk sheets like his life depended on it. His head, frosty with age yet full of hair, was titled upward. His eyes had seemed to roll back into his head, his ghostly whites looking out into nothing. My father was engulfed, no embraced, by a massive pair of feathered wings. The feathers shined bright in the dark, like diamonds shooting out the most blinding light imaginable. The angelic wings were attached to a massive yet slender figure kneeling down behind him. It had to be 9 feet tall as is. I couldn't imagine how large it was standing up. It had flowing golden hair, each strand as bright as a 24-carat star. It dangled its arms over my father's shoulders, like it was straddling an old friend. The arms had these circular growths on them, oval-shaped yet glassy. It was only when I saw the being's face did I realize what those growths were. The being had soft eyes, 8 pairs of them on the face. I could make out no nose or mouth. The being simply had eyes all over. They were white with golden iris placed perfectly in the center, like it had been sculpted by a master craftsman. The longer I looked at this being, the less frightened I became. My fear slowly melted away and was replaced by a soothing voice in my head. It simply told me, "Be not afraid." It was an androgynous voice, yet I swore I could hear the silky tones of my mother's voice in it. I clasped my mouth as tears started to form, yet I knew not why. The eyes on the celestial's arms began to awake, and I felt their curious views on me. The being tilted its head towards me, studying me. That uneasy feeling began to return, like I had seen something I shouldn't have. "Go now, child," the voice commanded softly. "It is not your time yet." The voice was sympathetic, yet oddly harsh. My father stirred slightly, and the being turned its attention back to him, soothing his strained mind. I backed away from the door, my eyes aching from the glow. I rubbed them and stumbled into my own room, ignorant of the thing I had witnessed. I collapsed onto my bed, and the slumbering world stole me into itself. I awoke late into the next day to the sound of my father whistling a merry tune. He knocked on my door and came in, a plate of eggs in hand and his phone in the other. He sat down next to me, offering me both without a word. On the screen was a breaking news story. Arnold Weaver, the man who had murdered my mother and walked free, had been killed. The man had been out celebrating his legal victory at a bar of all places. Early morning he had stumbled out when a neon sign above him collapsed from its scaffolding directly onto the man's head. It had killed him instantly. There were no pictures of the body, simply a cordoned off-street corner and a photo of a cop carrying away the bloody sign. It was a thick neon picture of a beer bottle, the bottom heavy with blood. My father looked pleased in spite of himself. I noticed some wrinkles around his eyes, like he had aged 5 years in one night. I asked him if he was tired, brushing past the news. He smiled sadly and said he was. "Using the ledger for yourself takes more out of you than it normally does, but it was worth it," he explained. "Dad, I looked into your room last night and I began eagerly, but taking one look into my father's eyes was all I needed to clamp shut. Don't worry about that just yet, Leo. I heard you were asking everyone at the wake last night." He spoke softly. "I'll tell you all you need to know for now. The ledger was a gift to our family generations ago. It was meant to protect us and avenge us when it failed. Of course, you've heard some of the things your cousins have asked for. That man at Cousin Sarah's job who got the promotion over her, for example." He scoffed, then winced at the memory. "The keeper cannot refuse a request, you see, no matter how abusive the use of its power can be. It takes a part of you every time, Leo. My father died young, as his before, and I'm sure I will as well. There we shall be judged, and I just hope they will look upon us with mercy." He grasped my hands. "Do you understand what I'm telling you here?" I nodded my head, and to be honest, even now I don't fully grasp it. He accepted my lie, and we went about our days like nothing had happened. This was 6 years ago now, and today is the day I buried my father. It was an aneurysm, or so I'm told. It came for him while he was sleeping. Probably didn't even feel it. We should all be so lucky, my Uncle Tony had said as he gorged himself on wine and pasta. A man pulled me aside during the funeral and explained my father had left me a locked box and a small sum of money as part of his will. He had the box in hand, and I didn't even have to open it. I tucked it away in my coat jacket and thanked the man, who disappeared into the crowd. I felt ill after that and started to leave. An arm caught me as I was out the door. I turned to see my Aunt Rita, her chalky face hidden by a vial of sorrow. She followed me to my car, saying how sorry she was Vincent had passed and how it was the cherry on top of her week. There was new neighbor at her condo, you see. She was young and taken to partying late into the night. Sometimes it would be 10, even 11 p.m. before the music finally died down. She said she wished Sarah Larson had never moved next door to her. She gave me a cold look as she said that, and a peck on the cheek as she said her goodbyes. I just stood next to my car, a sinking fear in my chest I hadn't felt in 6 years. So now I sit in my room, ledger in hand. I stare at the thousands of names etched into this tome. The paper has become cracked and wrinkly. It reeks of mothballs and dust. I have just finished adding the newest name, and now I wait, I suppose. I await the coming of the being, this guardian that has watched our family squander its power over petty grievances. My father was right in the end. I can only hope we aren't judged too harshly. "Around here, partner," said the grizzled and sunburnt face. "Daryl Choi?" I said, but it couldn't be. Now that's a name I haven't heard in a long time. The man tipped that face up at me, and I saw his familiar dark eyes clearly under his dusty cowboy hat. "You're dead," I blurted. The cowboy stood and drained his sarsaparilla. "This outsider bothering you, Smokes?" the bartender said, polishing a glass behind the gas station counter, which had been apparently repurposed as a saloon bar. There were still vape cartridges and 5-hour energy drinks on the shelf behind him, gathering dust next to bottles of unlabeled brown liquor and oil lamps. "I'm not an outsider," I argued. "This is my hometown. I took your niece London to prom, Mr. Jaraki." The bartender narrowed his eyes at me. "Name's Ben Wiley Sr. to you," he said, frowning under his huge white handlebar mustache. "Now, your money's as good as anyone else's, kid, but after you quench your thirst, you better take that steel horse you rode in on and ride along yonder if you know what's good for ye." "Yonder?" I said. "What the hell is going on? This is Massachusetts. Is this a bit?" The 5 other cowboys in the gas station, who were all sitting around makeshift tables that had been hammered together from pieces of the Holiday Station shelving, stopped their card game and glared at me. One of them reached for his sidearm. Daryl clapped his hand around my shoulder. "Settle down, boys," he said. "This here fella's kin, he just don't know it yet. Sit down, partner, and I'll tell my tale." "I just came in to pay for gas. The thingy wasn't working outside," I said. "I'm actually late to my mom's memorial service right now." "Oh, don't worry about that, son. It's my mom's. Sit down." I sat down. The plastic chair squeaked. Mr. Jaraki brought me a stein of sarsaparilla. "Folks around here, you see. We ain't afraid of death no more," Daryl said. He lit his pipe. Red embers lit his dark eyes. "I met death. He's a 10-cent man." Daryl stared through the Holiday Station windows past the gas pump and toward the horizon of Peabridge, Massachusetts. In 2016, Daryl Choi had been crushed to death by a semi on his way home from UMass Amherst. He was the first friend I ever lost. His death had hit me hard. We weren't as close as I was with some of my other friends, but we'd cut class a couple of times to vape by the creek and trade Yu-Gi-Oh cards. I didn't think he could grow facial hair, but he had a lot of it now. "You ever heard of Pet Sematary?" Daryl asked. "Yeah, I saw the movie," I said, "and the remake." "Well, turns out we got one of those." I stared incredulously. If I hadn't been at Daryl Choi's funeral, I wouldn't have believed him. "Okay," I said. "Basically, it works just like in old Steve King's account. You die, they put you in there, you come back wrong. First time they tried it with a person, it was Christina Elspeth, the old schoolmarm." "Oh no, Mrs. Elspeth died?" "It don't matter now," Daryl grunted. "Listen, they put the schoolmarm in the cemetery, and the next day she was crawling back all full of murderous rage and such, same as the dogs and cats and fish, but worse, spouting all kinds of vileness. So her husband shot her in the head." "Mr. Elspeth?" "Not before she cut him real good across the belly, though. The old fella bled out right quick in his flower garden. So they buried both of them in the cemetery again, on account of the headstone already being paid for." Mr. Elspeth was my youth pastor. He always snuck us leftover communion bread, and we'd eat it with marshmallow fluff. I didn't even know he had a gun. So another day passed, and, well, the two of them sprung back out of that dirt mound. Mr. Elspeth had come back wrong, just like his missus before him, all evil and such. But Mrs. Elspeth came back even wronger. Turns out there's a step down below evil. I'm talking downright Well, sort of like those red fellers we used to play at killin' as youngsters in that moving picture game. I don't know what the hell you're talking about, Daryl, I said. Can you drop the cowboy accent? Daryl glared at me. Folks call me Smokes these days, he said. Smokes Barlow. Wilbur Lee Barlow if you're a lawman. I'm not going to call you Wilbur Lee Barlow, I said. Nah, you'll call me Smokes like everyone else, he replied smoothly. Resident Evil, I said. Huh? The red zombies from Resident Evil. Is that what you were talking about earlier? Smokes shrugged. Anyhow, the two of them went on a killing spree round here, and I guess word got out about the cursed boneyard. Everyone and their mother, I mean the ones who survived, hoped maybe their kin would be the exception to the rule. So more and more bodies went in the mound, and each of them came out as evil as the last, except for Mrs. Elspeth, who came back worse for wear. They put her back? Again? Well, see, the headstone had been paid for, so Mrs. Elspeth comes back and she's still spitting hell's worst curses and hankering for a stabbing, but now she's also sort of a mad scientist sort. So she breaks into the hospital and starts grafting people's limbs together. Hang on. What the hell do you mean she's a mad scientist sort? I said. She was a music teacher? Well, see, that's what I'm trying to tell you. She's running around, hair all crazy, in a stolen lab coat, ranting and raving about man playing God and splicing DNA and such, creating humanity's next evolution and such. So eventually, the hospital staff knock her out and toss her back in the hole. Next time she came back, she was a 19th century venture capitalist named Montgomery Prescott III who aimed to turn Peabridge into a factory town. Sorry, when did this all happen? Of course, by this time her husband was on his third resurrection too, so Prescott was a force to be reckoned with the power of science behind him. The two of them did a bang-up job whipping this place into shape, corralling all the zombies and throwing them in the hole, for science, and to see if they could monetize it. Prescott Mining and Scientific Enterprise unburied all the dead from the regular old graveyard and tossed them in the hole, myself included. Then when they came back, they put all those evil folks to work in the mines or in the lab. Now those mines were dangerous, of course, with all the coal dust and gas leaks. Prescott didn't give a damn about safety. A lot of folks died, but they'd just bring them back. A couple weeks in, though, and there were about 20 Montgomery Prescott III's and about 100 mad scientists running around, and it turns out Monty Prescott works for no man. Each of them enlisted a squad of mad scientists and started their own enterprise. Wasn't too long before they started assassinating the competition. At this point, we'd all just gotten used to throwing people in the hole. Turns out after Prescott, you come back as kind of a Dracula. Now I won't go into all that business. You know Salem's Lot? No? Is that a gang? What about that there Catholic picture show up there on the Netflix, the one on the island, put together by that Irish feller, Michael something, O'Flanagan. Mike Flanagan? Midnight Mass? Smokes smiled. There you go. It was all pretty much like that. I looked around at the gas station. Other than the restructuring that had transformed it from a regular holiday gas station into a cowboy saloon, it looked like this place had been through waves of disasters. There were bullet holes all over the ceiling, a massive rusty brown stain that someone had tried to scrub out with lye on the linoleum, burn marks on the walls with strange curling imprints of what looked like vines and needles. I'm guessing that everyone is vampires didn't last long, I said. It just ain't sustainable. Smokes shook his head. Vampires always think it's a smart idea to make everyone vampires, but see, it just don't work out. What do they eat? Turns out they don't. They starve. Then it's back in the hole. So things carried on like that for a while. At a certain point, we were just chucking people in there to see if there was an end point. How far this thing goes. Turns out it goes evil, mindless zombie, mad scientist, Montgomery Prescott III, master vampire, ghoul, skeleton warrior, skeleton jazz musician, man-eating plant, plant-eating man, or a vegan, I guess you'd call him, and a real son of a bitch. Haunted ventriloquist, haunted dummy, haunted mummy, Christian family vlogger, Edna, evil cowboy, zombie cowboy, plant cowboy, Edna again, then just regular old pure cowboy. What comes after cowboy? I asked. Smokes shook his head. Nothing, he said. It's just cowboy all the way down after that. The cowboys playing poker glanced up at me through clouds of tobacco smoke. I recognized some of these people from around town, or rather, I recognized who they used to be. So, my mom's memorial, she's not really dead, is she? I said, a wave of hope and relief overwhelming me. I thought I'd have to say goodbye to her today, but she'll be back, won't she? Smokes only smiled sadly. You won't find fuel for your steel carriage, partner, said Smokes. I'll give you a ride to the cemetery. I followed Smokes out to the parking lot where several horses were hitched. Where did you guys get all these horses? I asked. Oh, where there's cowpokes, there's horses, he replied. That's a rule of nature. Smokes fed the horse an apple and stroked her mane before bidding me to climb on behind him. I held onto his waist, which was pretty weird for me because we were never close like that, and we galloped off up the highway toward the middle of town. We passed the elementary school, which had been covered in radiation warning signs and barbed wire. Then we passed the old Coney Island restaurant, which had been converted to a one-room schoolhouse. Main Street's restaurants, law firms, and tattoo parlor had been replaced by a dry goods store, an ox stable, a wagoner, an apothecary. The barber was the same, but it looked like he also pulled teeth now. The park that I played in as a kid had been bulldozed to hell, and in its place was a brown dirt yard with scattered mounds and holes all clustered near the center. A new sign hung over the entrance on a wooden board, Lazarus Mound Cemetery. I guess we could have been more creative, Smokes said, but it's too late for couldas, I reckon. A group of cowboys, clad in black, stood over a dirt pile. They held their hats to their chest as the eulogy was read. Smokes followed me to my mother's fresh grave. I dropped my bouquet of flowers on top of it. Family only, said one of the cowboys, glaring at me. Uncle Matt, it's me, I said. He twirled his goatee and grimaced, revealing a new gold tooth. It's Billy Cobra Nash these days, he said. Didn't recognize you, son. I suppose you want to say a few words? He gestured to the mound. Well, I would, I said, but I'm pretty sure she'll pop out halfway through. That's no way to talk about your poor dead mother, said Great-Grandma Tess, who I hadn't seen since 2004 when she died from stroke. Except she wasn't Great-Grandma Tess. She was a short old man with a long rabbity mustache and 2 guns on either side. Let the kid grieve, Slim, said Cobra. The sun set on us. The resurrected cowboy versions of my family members became hungry and bored and set up a small campfire where they heated up coffee and beans and spun some yarns. I asked questions about the cowboy economy and how it could sustain itself in this Massachusetts town that didn't have that many cows, and they responded by cussing me out and telling me to get lost. City boy. I said I couldn't be a city boy because I was from here, and they took away my beans. Finally, after about an hour, there was rustling from the mound. Here she comes, said Cobra. The dirt shuffled and ran down the side of the mound, a miniature landslide. Finally, a gloved hand emerged. Then an arm, a dirty, dusty head crowned in a cowboy hat, burst from the pile, coughing. Well, butter my biscuits, if it ain't the cheat, just in time for dinner, said Slim, hands on his hips. My mom, who was now a dirt-covered cowboy named the Cheat, clicked his boots together to dislodge some stones from his spurs. Howdy. Miss me, fellas, the Cheat rasped, spitting pebbles into the fire. Mom? I said. The Cheat looked me over. They call me Vernon the Cheat Maddox now, my mom said. Why Maddox? I asked. Mom, what was wrong with Nguyen? Ain't a cowboy name, said Mom. A cowboy can't be Vietnamese? Listen, kid, said the Cheat, clapping me on the arm. I've had a long day, and to be frank, I can't abide a city slicker like you before I get my brew. Gotta fill up on beans and coffee or I'll be skinner than a jazz skeleton in 2 shakes of a lamb's tail. I watched my mom walk away toward the fire, greeting the other cowboys like old friends. It's like she didn't even recognize me, I said, broken. Smokes patted me on the shoulder. That ain't your mother no more, partner, he said. Same as I ain't Daryl Choi. What's the point of raising people from the dead if they're not themselves? I said. I reckon you've missed the essential theme of the pet cemetery premise, Smokes said. The point is, it's a curse, not a blessing. To the living, at least. Mr. Stephen King said sometimes dead is better. And here in Peabridge, we reckon he was right. I heard a metal click. I turned around to see Smokes' shotgun pointed square at my forehead. Whoa, I said. The cowboys at the fire turned to watch with dim interest, including my own mother. Daryl, hey, put that away. Dead is better, but you know what's best? Cowboy, he said. Cowboy is the best there is. Best there is, said the cowpokes around the fire in eerie unison. Wait. There was a bang. My vision filled with red, and then there was nothing. I saw and felt and heard nothing as Smokes watched my limp body fall backwards into the hole. He kicked dirt over me casually. He holstered his weapon. He sat down around the fire next to the others. How many bullets you got, Smokes? Asked the cheat through a mouthful of beans. Not enough to get him all the way through, Smokes replied, lighting his pipe. But enough to get him past Dracula, for sure. That's the one you gotta watch out for, the cheat said. I'll stand vigil with you, partner. You go home, Maddox. Wash that dust off. Tend to your herd. Be on the lookout for Edna, word is. She's still at large in places, Smokes said. She'll come around, said Slim. They always do. The campfire's embers rose up to the cloudy, dark sky. Smokes leaned back and tipped his hat low over his eyes. This town's got room for plenty more cowboys, he said. Around the fire, a dozen pairs of black, gleaming eyes turned toward the Lazarus mound, waiting. Growing up, I attended what I thought was a charismatic church that, in hindsight, I realize was an apocalyptic cult. They had a lot of strange rituals and customs, but none more important than speaking in tongues. The church believed that if one prayed and begged hard enough, and if they were worthy, they would be able to speak in the language of heaven, and by doing so, it would be a sign of a divine presence residing inside of you, and that once you had this gift, you would be raptured and spared from the coming apocalypse on earth and the eternal torment of the afterlife. If you hadn't yet spoken in tongues, you wouldn't go to heaven when the rapture, the moment when the saved ascended to heaven, occurred. You'd be left on earth to experience the apocalypse, and when you died, you'd burn in hell for eternity. That's a lot for a kid to process. The way to get this gift of the Spirit was to go up to the front of the church during the altar call, which happened toward the end of every service, right after the collection plate was passed. The congregation, traumatized by the pastor's frequent and vivid descriptions of the eternal torment awaiting the unsaved, would gather around the altar, praying for the gift of tongues for themselves or members of the church who hadn't yet received it. Those who didn't have it were instructed to pray, praise God, and beg for the gift. We'd do this regularly, desperately, and the altar calls could last for hours. Imagine it. Children and adults all crowded around the red-carpeted steps of the altar, screaming, spraying saliva, sobbing, praying, sweating, and placing their hands on each other, all pleading for this gift, genuinely expecting the rapture to happen at any moment. Honestly, I spent most of my childhood and early teens trying to receive this elusive gift. I spent countless hours at the altar, begging and pleading with God to grant me the one thing that would save me from hell. Night after night, surrounded by screaming adults, I begged God until my voice was raw. To add insult to injury, it seemed like at every altar call, someone around me received the gift. To my left or to my right, someone would begin babbling incoherently, collapse to the ground, and then be helped up to their feet by a celebrating congregation. But despite all my efforts and sincerity, each night it was denied to me. Eventually, the crowd around the altar would disperse. Late at night, often around midnight, the service would finally end, and we'd go home. I'd spend the drive back staring out the car window at the night sky, my clothes damp with sweat, and my throat sore from pleading with a God who refused to answer. Growing up, the fear of hell, the apocalypse, and eternal damnation was a real force in my life. I can remember times when my mom came home late from work, and I was convinced she'd been raptured, leaving me behind. I'd hide in my closet, clutching some sort of improvised weapon, a broom, a steak knife, etc., certain that the damned would soon kick in the front door. For what purpose? Maybe to eat me or sacrifice me to Satan. I wasn't sure what the damned did, but I knew it couldn't be good. All this made for an interesting, high anxiety, and, at times, sleep-deprived childhood. When I was around 16, the pastor started preaching that the rapture was particularly imminent. We began having service every night about the coming apocalypse, and the importance of speaking in tongues for the unsaved. The pastor warned that hell would be infinitely worse for people like me who knew the truth, but hadn't accepted the gift. This was especially frustrating for me. I was trying so hard. After the collection plate was passed, we had the inevitable altar call, and at each of them I tried harder and harder to speak in tongues. But it still wasn't happening. I started to think maybe I was immune or something. Finally, after an especially long altar call, the pastor took me aside and told me, in a voice filled with compassion, concern, and perhaps a hint of exasperation, that if I just repeated the word hallelujah over and over again, God could use it as a foothold to enter my heart and grant me the gift. At the next altar call, I gave it a try. I knelt at the altar, shouting hallelujah over and over again. I was helped by an older man in the church who often mentored and prayed with the young boys, either one-on-one at his house, which he preferred, or at the altar. He considered this his calling. This oddly, overly affectionate man, a self-proclaimed prayer warrior, whispered words of encouragement in my ear as he knelt behind me, rubbing his hands tenderly across my sweating back and shoulders. Hallelujah! I shouted, again and again. My arms waved, my body swayed, and my knees ached. My throat was raw and my voice was fading. The words began to run together, syllables dropping and merging. This only excited the people around me, especially the man behind me. Hallelujah! Hallelujah! I kept shouting faster and faster. Exhausted, the words blurred into nonsense. Around me, the church members screamed and prayed with ecstatic fervor. The pastor, now kneeling in front of me, tangled her fingers in my hair with one hand, grabbed my chin with the other, and brought her fleshy face close to mine, pressing her puckered lips against my ear. "No, say it like this," she whispered, her breath hot, moist, and intrusive. And then she began repeating the word hallelujah, improvising like a jazz musician, creating her own excited babble of syllables to accompany mine. Behind me, the man prayed harder, his breath hot on my neck, his body pressed close to mine. His hands moved roughly over my shoulders and back. He whispered in my ear, urging me to pray harder, harder, to let it inside me. Hallelujah! Hallelujah! I tried to keep shouting, but my voice faltered, my words turning to mush. The crowd erupted in a frenzy of excitement. The word blurred, lost its meaning, became a nonsensical noise. My throat burned, my body trembled. The pastor kept whispering in my ear, but her voice seemed to change. The word she kept repeating was now unrecognizable. The first syllable, a percussive exhalation. The second, a wheezing gasp. The third, obscenely stretched out. The last, almost a cry of pain. Her wet lips squirmed against my ear like worms. I felt her tongue in my ear, her voice in my head, and suddenly something shifted. The air grew thick and cold. The sounds around me suddenly muffled and distant. I felt like I was submerged in dark water. A strange presence loomed all around me. No, inside me. A watching, waiting, something. I felt 1,000,000 miles away, and a coldness crept into my chest, an internal ocean of black water teeming with something dark and squirming, rising up my throat and bursting out of my mouth. It hurt. I started screaming. We all seemed to be screaming in unison, and the lights were flickering, and suddenly I was being helped to my feet. I had apparently blacked out, collapsing face forward onto the steps of the altar. It wasn't an unusual occurrence at the church. They called it being slain by the Spirit. I had rug burns on my forehead for weeks. Still, as I came to, all around me, everyone was ecstatic. "You've got it," someone shouted, their hands gripping my arms and shoulders. Everyone was happy. I was being congratulated, showered with love, and in the middle of it all, someone, I don't know who, whispered in my ear, "It's inside you now." And I felt a strange chill. I knew I should be happy. I tried to convince myself I was, but I felt different. Hollowed out, violated in a way I couldn't quite grasp or articulate. Later, before the service ended, the pastor asked me to come up to the pulpit to make an announcement. Numb, exhausted, and uncertain, I walked up. As I neared the pulpit, I glanced at the pastor. Our eyes met, and I still remember her expression. Though she smiled, her face seemed smug and sly, as though the two of us were co-conspirators. She nodded toward the pulpit, silently encouraging me to play along. I stepped up and looked out at the congregation, the only friends and community I had ever known. Their upturned faces were expectant, like children waiting for a story. I made my choice. "I spoke in tongues," I said into the microphone. My voice was raw and my throat was sore, but the declaration boomed around the church with a confidence I didn't feel. The congregation erupted in applause and shouts of "Amen" and "Praise the Lord." Their words blended into an indecipherable babble that sounded like tongues. Hallelujah. But I wasn't exactly sure what it was that I'd done. I wasn't sure what I'd let in. That night I couldn't sleep. My room felt suffocating, the air thick with something unseen, some new and terrible thing inside of me and around me. I lay awake, replaying the altar scene in my mind. The man's hands, the pastor's smile, the cold presence that had seemingly entered me. The feeling of something inside of me boiling over, the pain, and the beginning of a scream. And then I heard it, a whisper, faint and guttural from my own mouth. But it wasn't me speaking. It wasn't my voice. It wasn't English or the word hallelujah. It was something older, darker, like the sound of something massive choking up something vile, but I could understand it. "Not now," it said, from my own mouth. Not now, but soon. I froze, my body paralyzed as the words seemed to echo in the room and my mind. And then, just as suddenly, the voice, the feeling, was gone. I refused to go back to the church after that. Rejecting the faith of my family at such a young age tore my life apart. But I survived. I grew up. And over the following decades, I found peace, love, and my place in the wider world. Or I thought I had. But last night, as I was washing dishes, I started to gag, cough, and gasp for air. And I felt it again, rising up. The voice that wasn't a voice. The words that weren't words in any human language. They burned and tore at my chest and throat and spilled out into the empty air around me. "Really soon now," it said through me, with undisguised glee. The plate shattered in my hand, cutting deep into my palm. Cold dread rushed through me and then, somehow beyond me, standing at my sink in my empty house, with blood welling up in my cupped palm, I realized I wasn't alone with the voice or the pain. Not really. I could feel them. The connection snapped into place, somehow simultaneously stabbing and tearing at me, a pain sharp, dull, and overwhelming, like a clawed finger pushing into the center of my mind, slicing, stretching, and flipping a switch. I knew all of them, the others, the ones who'd been there at the church when I was a boy. Their thoughts, their faces, their secrets, loves, and fears flooded my mind. They were scattered across the world. Most had moved on, healed, and built new lives just like me, but I knew at that moment, we all knew, that we were still marked and connected by the same terrible fate and bond. The voice was in them too, rising up, burning, tearing at us all. I could feel their fear, confusion, pain, mirroring my own, and a growing understanding of what was coming. A terrible, all-consuming compulsion building inside me, in all of us, pressing, urgent, and impossible to resist any longer. For death, destruction, chaos, glorious purpose, and hell on earth. The voice was rising up again, preparing to speak, in agony, I clawed at my face and throat, tearing at my collar in desperation, unintentionally smearing blood from my cut hand across my face, mouth, and neck. Blood. Red, hot, salty, and so beautiful. On its own, my tongue lashed out impossibly long, flailing wildly at the air, lapping at the blood around my mouth and in my palm. It was unexpectedly delicious, sparking an explosion of pleasure in my injured hand, groin, chest, and head. A pleasure somehow shared with all the others, rapturous in its mounting intensity. Heavenly. "It's almost time," we all choked and gagged out in gleeful unison and hellish chorus, followed by horrible, wet sounds that burned in our chests, tore at our throats, and burst out of our mouths. Inhuman, monstrous, utterly insane sounds that we all recognized as laughter. The world exploded in a shower of glass and screaming metal. One moment I was driving, the wipers fighting a losing battle against the torrential rain, blurring the already indistinct highway markers. The next, there was a deafening roar, a bone-jarring impact that stole the breath from my lungs, and then silence. An unnerving, absolute silence that should have been filled with the shriek of tearing metal, the shattering of glass, the pained cries of the injured. But there was nothing. Only a suffocating stillness, broken only by the rhythmic thump of my own pulse, a frantic drum against the sudden unsettling quiet. My head throbbed, a dull ache that pulsed in time with the frantic beating of my heart. I tried to move, to assess the damage, but my limbs felt heavy, unresponsive. Slowly, tentatively, I opened my eyes. The interior of the car was a mangled mess. Twisted metal clawed at the darkness. Shards of glass glittered like malevolent stars scattered across the crushed dashboard. Rain poured in through gaping holes in the roof, slicking the already sodden fabric of my seat. The air smelled metallic, acrid, like blood and burning rubber. Yet I felt nothing. No searing pain, no broken bones, not even a scratch. It was utterly surreal. I should be bleeding, screaming, possibly unconscious. Instead, I was remarkably intact, sitting amidst the wreckage of a catastrophic accident, experiencing only a dull throbbing in my head and a rising tide of disorientation. The silence was the most unsettling aspect. The absence of sound was more terrifying than any scream. It was a silence that pressed in, suffocating, amplifying the disquiet. It was as if the very fabric of reality had been ripped apart and then hastily stitched back together, leaving this grotesque, silent void in its wake. I pushed against the wreckage, forcing myself to sit up. My body ached, but the pain was negligible, a dull pressure that didn't match the severity of the crash. I looked around. The highway stretched before me, a dark, rain-slicked ribbon winding into the night. There were no lights, no other cars, just the relentless downpour and the crushing weight of the silence. I was utterly alone, isolated in the heart of this metal tomb, surrounded by the wreckage of what should have been a fatal accident. A terrifying, perfect solitude. Fear, cold and sharp, began to claw its way into my consciousness. This wasn't right. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Accidents like this resulted in casualties, injuries, chaos, and noise. Yet here I was, miraculously unharmed, adrift in a sea of silent destruction. The incongruity of it all was deeply unsettling. The dissonance between the catastrophic reality of the mangled car and my own unscathed body, a gaping chasm that threatened to swallow me whole. A feeling of unreality, of profound wrongness, settled over me like a shroud. The rain continued to fall, washing over the wreckage, blurring the already indistinct shapes around me. I tried to focus on the details, to ground myself in the reality of the situation, but the silence persisted, a constant, ominous presence that heightened the sense of unreality. It was like a suffocating blanket, muffling everything, even my own thoughts. The world felt strangely muted, as if I were watching a scene unfold from behind a thick sheet of glass. Or perhaps I was already behind that glass, separated from the world by a silent, impenetrable barrier. I eventually managed to clamber out of the crushed vehicle, the metal groaning in protest under my touch. The rain continued its relentless assault, plastering my clothes to my body, soaking me to the bone. The ground beneath my feet was a mixture of mud and broken glass. Each step I took sent a shiver down my spine, a visceral reminder of the horrific event that should have left me shattered. Yet here I was, eerily intact. As I stumbled away from the wreckage, I caught a glimpse of myself in the reflection of a shattered car window. My face was pale, drawn, etched with the shock of the near-death experience. But there were no cuts, no bruises, no blood, not even a single scratch. My skin was flawlessly smooth, unblemished, a stark contrast to the brutal reality of the scene surrounding me. The realization slammed into me with the force of a physical blow. Something was deeply, horribly wrong. More than wrong. Impossible. This wasn't just an accident. It was something else. Something far more sinister. Something beyond comprehension. The implications hung in the air, heavy and suffocating, and my heart began to pound in my chest once more. This time not with the shock of the impact, but with a terrifying sense of impending doom. The silence remained, a constant, chilling companion, a stark testament to the unsettling and impossible nature of my survival. The rain continued to fall, a bleak and unforgiving curtain drawn over the unfolding horror. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a world washed clean, sterile almost, a stark contrast to the chaos I had just escaped. The silence, however, remained, a heavy, oppressive blanket stifling any lingering hope of normalcy. I ran a hand over my cheek, expecting the rough scrape of gravel against my skin, the sting of a fresh wound. My fingers encountered only smooth, flawless skin. The memory of the searing pain, the impact, the feeling of being crushed, all impossibly vivid, were juxtaposed against the cold, unblemished reality of my own body. Where were the abrasions, the cuts, the bruises that should have been decorating my skin like grotesque tattoos? There were none. My skin was flawless, an unsettling testament to something beyond explanation. Panic, raw and visceral, threatened to overwhelm me. I examined my arms, my legs, every inch of my body, searching for some physical sign, some evidence to confirm the horrific reality of the accident. But my skin remained strangely pristine, untouched by the carnage I had just survived. It was as if the accident had happened to someone else, a spectral twin, leaving me untouched, an anomaly, a ghost in my own life. The thought twisted in my gut, icy and sharp, a constant reminder of the impossible truth. The rational part of my brain screamed for an explanation. Maybe it was shock. Maybe the rain had washed away any superficial injuries. Maybe I was hallucinating. But the mangled wreckage of the car, the persistent silence, the chilling absence of any physical trauma, all these facts contradicted the possibility of hallucination. This wasn't a dream. This was an impossible reality, a nightmarish paradox that defied all logic. And the silence. Oh, the silence. It was the most terrifying aspect, a constant, chilling presence that amplified every unsettling detail. The rising sun cast a pale, weak light on the scene, revealing the full extent of the devastation. The car was a twisted, mangled mess, a monument to destruction. Yet I stood beside it, unscathed, a living paradox in a world that didn't seem to acknowledge my existence. It was like a cruel joke, a dark comedy played out in the silent aftermath of a catastrophic event. The impossible silence gnawed at my sanity, a constant reminder of my improbable survival. I stumbled towards the nearest road, hoping to find help, to have someone confirm the reality of my situation, or perhaps to help me understand its absurdity. The road was deserted, the emptiness mirrored by the desolate landscape. The world was mute, watching me with a silent, unnerving gaze. Hours have passed, and there was still nothing, or so I thought. As I walked towards town, I could have sworn that I was seeing someone following me, someone that was just always out of my eyes, even outside of my peripherals. Show yourself! I began yelling out, but it seems that maybe I jumped the gun. I continued on my long journey back home, still without passing a single soul. I finally made it back home, but things seemed wrong. I saw my wife and she was crying. She was sitting down on the couch wiping tears as she was on the phone, and without a moment of hesitation she took off in a hurry. I could not figure out why, though, but there was no use following her on foot, so I just waited. I waited, and waited for hours, watching television and browsing the web until the door opened and my wife came in. But someone was behind her, wrapped up with bandages. I was staring until I finally realized who it was behind my wife. I was looking at me. I don't even know how this is possible, but seeing my own face made me feel lightheaded. A wave of nausea hit me so hard I had to grip the wall before my legs gave out. My vision blurred as I steadied myself, but my eyes stayed locked on the scene unfolding before me. My wife guided me, or whatever it was, into our bedroom, gently laying him down. She stayed by his side for a while, smoothing the sheets, brushing the hair from my forehead, whispering things only meant for me. Then she left. That's when he turned his head. For the first time since the accident, he looked directly at me. My breath hitched as I saw my own reflection in his darkening eyes. No, not darkening, blackening, as if ink was bleeding through them, swallowing the whites whole. That sure was a close one, I heard my own voice say, though it didn't feel like mine. This body was almost useless, but I'm glad it survived. Get comfortable, because unless you get as lucky as I did, you're going to be stuck like that for a while. What did he mean by that? What was even happening? My head pounded with questions, but I forced the words out. What happened? I wanted answers, but all I got in return was a laugh. My laugh twisted into something cold and cruel. I saw an opportunity, and I took it. That wasn't an answer. Not really, but something told me I wasn't going to get a better one. My frustration boiled over, my hands clenching into fists, my mind screaming at the impossibility of it all. I slammed my fist into the wall. The drywall cracked. I froze. I could affect my surroundings. Maybe I wasn't some Casper doomed to haunt my own home. Maybe, just maybe, I still had a chance. I followed him for weeks. I watched as he ate my food, used my computer, spent time with my wife. I watched as he walked into my job, smiled at my co-workers, laughed at their jokes. He slipped into my life with sickening ease, and no one, not a single person, questioned it. But something else was happening. At first, it was just flickers at the edge of my vision, little blurs that vanished when I tried to focus on them. Then they became more defined. Shapes, figures, moving in the dark corners of rooms, just out of reach. I thought they were stalking me, but they weren't. They were stalking him, or rather, my body. They wanted what I wanted, what he wanted. They wanted inside my skin. They didn't seem aggressive yet. They reminded me of scavengers circling a dying animal, waiting for their moment to strike. But then I looked at my hands. The fingers, the arms. They weren't solid anymore. They were darkening, losing their form, the same inky black that filled his eyes creeping through me. I was turning into them. I didn't know how long I had, but I knew this. I was running out of time. If I didn't act now, I'd be lost forever. Just another shadow lurking at the edges, waiting for scraps. I would take my body back. The plan was simple. I knew my schedule. I knew his schedule. I also knew that while the normal world couldn't touch me, I could still affect it. The only exception was the thing wearing my body. And I knew one more thing. For something to take over a body, the occupant had to leave first. For me, that had been the accident. That meant there was only one way to force him out. I had to nearly take my own life. If I failed, I'd become one of them. But even if there was only a 1% chance that I could reclaim what was mine, I had to try. I slipped into the car, silent, unseen, and sat in the passenger seat. He drove onto the highway, the speedometer climbing. The city lights blurred past as I steadied my thoughts. I couldn't screw this up. I wouldn't screw this up. The bridge was coming up fast. I reached out. With everything I had, I grabbed the wheel and wrenched it sideways. Tires screeched, horns blared, impact. Metal crunched, glass shattered, and the world erupted into chaos. The car slammed into the ground below in a sickening cacophony of destruction. The smell of burning rubber and gasoline filled the air. My body, his body, slumped over in the driver's seat, blood dripping from nearly every opening on his face. His ink-filled eyes fluttered open, then slowly slid shut. And then everything went black. I am writing this because I don't think anyone else has ever gone through this. No one else has returned to tell the tale. I didn't make it. I failed. As I type, the ink creeps higher, swallowing me inch by inch. Soon, I will lose all sense of self. I will become one of the others. A shadow, a scavenger, a nothing. If anyone reads this, please, don't forget me.